Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're a child again, but not in a cozy bed. You're lying on cold stone. Your blanket is straw, and the lullaby, it's the sound of someone crying in the dark dot. In the medieval world, even little ones weren't safe from chains. Steal a loaf of bread, and suddenly you're behind bars, with rats for roommates, and no one coming to get you. Tonight, let's drift back in time, to the quiet stories of the smallest prisoners, the forgotten children of medieval prisons. Cue soft candlelight flicker, distant iron creaks, bare footsteps echoing down a stone hallway. Wind whistles low through a barred window somewhere far above. It's bedtime, and tonight, we're headed straight into the dark. Let's start simple. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes in a medieval prison, let alone a full day. But hey, since you're all cozy under your blanket, why don't we imagine you're there? The year, let's say 1347. Not a great year. But don't worry, it's not the plague part yet. You're in a small medieval town, and thanks to an unfortunate misunderstanding, maybe you borrowed a loaf of bread or sneezed near a noble. You've just been arrested. No trial yet, no lawyers, no warning. Just rough hands grabbing you, muttering something about the stocks, and dragging you down a street that's somehow even muddier than usual. The entrance is not welcoming, so here we are, in front of the town's dungeon. No sign, no doorman, no rules posted outside. Just a thick wooden door with iron bolts, and a guard who smells like cabbage, beer, and bad decisions. You might be thinking, it can't be that bad, right? Maybe there's a bed, a window, some straw, a rat with a name. Nope. The moment that door opens, everything you knew about discomfort is about to be redefined. Step inside. The door slams shut behind you. That light from the outside world, gone. It's candlelit in here if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's just whatever little bit of moonlight manages to sneak through the cracks. The air is thick. Not just bad, not just stale. It's ancient. Like every breath you're taking has already been used by 10 criminals and 2 dead guys. It smells like old blood, mold, wet rope, and something suspiciously like turnips. But no one's cooking. Setting the scene. Hello, nightmare. You shuffle forward. Your chains rattle. Yes, chains. They don't even fit right, too tight on one wrist, loose on the other. Your feet slide on the damp floor, which feels suspiciously sticky in some places, and suspiciously slippery in others. You don't ask questions, not here. The walls are stone, but not the smooth kind. They're jagged, sweating moisture, like they're nervous just having you around. Water drips somewhere nearby, and every so often, something skitters. Could be a rat, could be a bug, could be your imagination slowly melting. Doesn't matter. All terrifying. There's a torch on the wall. It's barely holding on. Flickers just enough to show you the shapes around you, shapes you wish you hadn't seen. Scratches on the wall, chains hanging down, a pile of something that might be old clothes, or a body. No one's checked in a while. The staff is not friendly. Now the guard behind you gives you a shove. Not hard, but hard enough to say, welcome. Don't make me care. The medieval prison guard is not here to help you. He's not here to protect you. He's here because either he owed someone a favor, or he was too violent for the tavern job. He's got a stick, a flask, and one working eye hand. He's proud. Of all 3, he might say something like, try not to scream too much tonight. The rats are sensitive. And that's probably the nicest thing you'll hear for the next 24 hours. First impressions. The cell then. The big moment. You reach your cell. It's not really a room. More like a stone closet someone gave up on halfway through. There's no window, just a slit in the wall that lets in cold air and bird droppings. No bed, just strolled, itchy, probably alive. If you're lucky, there's a wooden bucket in the corner. It's not for storage. The ceiling is low. You can't stand fully upright, but lying down feels like an invitation for rats to crawl on your face, which they might do anyway. You hear someone coughing violently in the next cell. A dry, wet wheezing sound that makes your lungs feel itchy just from proximity. Great, you've got a roommate through the wall, and he's probably contagious. The sounds that keep you company. You sit there, breathing slowly through your mouth, trying not to cry. You hear chains rattling, moans low, groaning and hopeless. A man humming something broken and tuneless in the cell across from yours. Dripping water, always dripping, forever dripping. Footsteps you think are a guard, but could be someone else. And silence. a thick silence that wraps around everything and settles into your bones. This place doesn't sleep, it just waits. Your new best friends, rats and roaches. Let's talk about your roommates, not the human ones, the other ones. First up, rats, big ones, bold ones, the kind that don't run when you shout. They look at you like you're the guest. They'll chew your toes if you don't keep them moving. Next up, insects, roaches, beetles, centipedes. They live in the straw, in the walls, sometimes in your clothes. They don't judge you, they just want your warmth. Isn't that cozy? The smell you'll never forget, all right. Let's finally address the worst part, the smell. It's not one smell, it's a symphony, a brutal, never-ending, ever-evolving stench. There's sweat old and new, rotting food probably spilled, gruel from last week, human waste, remember the bucket, blood, mold, and something you'll eventually identify as hopelessness. You can't breathe through your nose. You try to breathe through your mouth, but the taste doesn't help. It's like the air itself has flavor and it's not good. Trying to sleep, night comes. You don't know how you know it, just gets colder. You try to sleep, you really do. But the floor's too hard, the straw's too itchy, you can't stretch out, you're chained to the wall. Someone screams in their sleep, someone else prays too loud, someone coughs every 6 seconds like clockwork. You try to curl into yourself, rats bump your leg, you cry a little, but the tears dry quick. The dungeon doesn't care. Final thoughts before the sun rises. Here's the thing, you're not special. Down here, no one's coming to check on you. No one's writing your name down. You're not waiting for a lawyer. There's no one to complain to. You're a voice in the dark, a number, a groan among groans. And the worst part, this isn't even punishment yet. This is just the holding area. So next time someone medieval life, you know, swords, goblets, dragons, just remember this part. The cold, the stink, the silence. Because even if you were lucky enough to get out of here in one piece, you'd never be the same again. Chapter 2. The arrest. Guilty or not, let's say it again. You wouldn't survive one day in a medieval prison. But here's the kicker. You didn't even have to do anything to get thrown in there. In fact, in medieval times, being innocent was often the least important part of staying out of jail. So tonight, we're taking a little walk through the nightmare that was medieval justice, or the lack of it. Get ready to meet a justice system where guilt was optional, trials were weird, and bad luck was basically a crime. Guilt. What's that? First off, let's clear this up. You didn't need to do something wrong to get arrested in medieval times. Sometimes all you had to do was be in the wrong place at the wrong time, say the wrong thing near the wrong person, look suspicious whatever that meant, or, the classic, have someone with more power not like you. Evidence. Eyewitnesses, CCTV. Try the village gossip said so, or the pig looked nervous around him. Common crimes that could land you in chains. All right, ready to hear. Some of the offenses that could get you tossed in jail. Stealing bread, yup. One crusty, half-eaten loaf, and suddenly you're public enemy number one. Hunger wasn't a defense. Starving, that's your problem. Steal food. Now it's everyone's problem. Owing money, couldn't pay the blacksmith. Or the miller. Boom. Jail time. In fact, debtors' prisons were a thing. You owed someone, and couldn't pay. They'd throw you in a cell until you could pay. Which is a bit confusing, because how exactly are you making money in a dungeon? Witchcraft, oh boy. This one was the medieval jackpot of false arrests. Someone saw you picking herbs in the moonlight. Which, your cow died suddenly. Which, you sneezed twice in a row. Clearly ... A witch. And don't even get me started on women with cats. Automatic suspicion, blasphemy or heresy, said something strange about the church, questioned a priest. Or maybe you just misquoted scripture. Boom. Dungeon. Bonus round if you accidentally owned a banned book. No, you don't get to explain. You're guilty by vibe, public drunkenness, or fighting, all right. This one feels a bit more reasonable. If you were swinging punches at the tavern, or loudly insulting the king's beard after a few too many mugs of Allier, you'd probably end up in a cell. Still, orderly conduct wasn't exactly enforced evenly. Looking suspicious? No. Joke. Just looking shifty or unusual was enough. Maybe your cloak was weird. Maybe you had one eye slightly bigger than the other. Maybe you whistled too confidently. Doesn't matter. If the constable didn't like your face off, you went. How arrests actually happened, there weren't police the way we think of them today. Instead, there were constables, semi-official town enforcers, watchmen, usually underpaid, half-asleep night guys with lanterns, angry mobs. Honestly, these were pretty effective. If enough townsfolk pointed at you and screamed, you were done for. No arrest warrants, no Miranda rights, usually just a grunt, a rough shove, and a pair of rusty chains. Sometimes you were dragged by your collar through the town square like some twisted parade. Other times, you were snatched in the middle of the night. No warning, no trial, just straight into the darkness. But I didn't do anything. Yeah, that was kind of the catch. Truth is, medieval prisons weren't just for criminals. They were holding pens for anyone the authorities wanted out of the way. Sometimes you were arrested just to make someone else look good. A local noble wanted your land. Jail time. A merchant saw you as competition. Suddenly, someone found stolen goods in your cart. Your neighbor didn't like how your chicken crowed. Says here you were plotting treason. Once you were accused, good luck disproving it. There weren't a lot of defense lawyers wandering around the town square. Trials. Kind of. Did you get a trial? Maybe. Was it fair? No. Some trials were just two people talking in front of a judge while everyone else shouted. Others used trial by ordeal. That's right. You'd be tested by fire or water to prove your innocence. Here are a few gems. Trial by water. They tied you up and threw you into a river. If you floated, you were guilty because witches repelled water. If you sank, congratulations, you were innocent. And probably dead. Trial by fire. You had to hold a hot iron or walk across burning coals, then wait a few days. If the wounds were healing nicely, you were innocent. If they got infected like wounds often did in the Middle Ages, you were guilty, also infected. Trial by combat. You could literally fight your accuser, even if they were twice your size and had a sword, because clearly God would help the innocent win. Spoiler, he didn't. Always. What if you confessed? Yes. The confession. Sometimes the easiest way to end your misery was just to confess whether or not you actually did it. Maybe they dangled you in chains for 3 days. Maybe they denied you food and sleep. Maybe they threatened your family. Eventually, you'd say anything just to make it stop. Of course, once he confessed, things didn't get better. They just got more official. You'd be branded, fined, whipped, hanged, or, yes, thrown in prison again until execution day. And if you didn't confess, well, the torturer would be happy to assist you until you changed your mind. Wrong place, wrong time. Let's say you're a traveler, just passing through. You don't know the town, you don't know the rules, and someone just got robbed or murdered. You're a stranger. You don't have an alibi. You don't even speak the local dialect very well. Guess what? Welcome to the dungeon. Population you travelers were often blamed for crimes, especially if the real criminal had friends or influence. And since you had no one to vouch for you, you were toast. Just existing was risky sometimes. The only crime was being poor, or being loud, or being too quiet. One woman was accused of witchcraft because she kept too many cats. Another man was thrown in jail for looking at the bishop in a disrespectful manner. That's it. That's the charge. The law was flexible, and usually not in your favor. The grim reality of justice. So yeah, the whole justice system in medieval times was basically a game of bad luck and bad timing. You could be innocent, kind, hard-working, and still end up in a cold, dark prison, chained to a wall, waiting for someone to remember your name. And while the system claimed to serve truth and order, more often than not, it served those in power. If you were poor, unpopular, or unlucky, the dungeon door was always open. So what have we learned tonight? Stay indoors. Don't talk too much. Don't talk too little. Don't make eye contact with priests, pigs, or powerful people. And absolutely no circumstances knees twice in a row while holding herbs. Because in the medieval world, you didn't need to be guilty to be punished. You just had to be there. Chapter 3. The Journey to Prison. You ever take a bumpy road trip in the back of a rusty van with no windows, no AC, and no legroom? Now remove the van. Replace it with a wooden cart. Take away the shocks, cushions, dignity, and your shoes. Welcome to your journey to a medieval prison. Hope you weren't planning on a 5-star experience. Let's rewind a bit. You've just been arrested. Maybe you stole a loaf of bread. Maybe you were accused of heresy. Maybe you just happened to stand next to a guy with the plague. Doesn't matter. The guards think you're guilty enough. And now, It's time to take a ride to your new home, a damp, miserable hole in the ground. But first, let's get you dressed for the occasion, not in a nice tunic or something comfy. No, in shackles. Iron ones, big, cold, clunky rings slapped around your wrists and ankles like medieval jewelry, heavy enough to bruise, loud enough to jingle with every step, like some kind of sad human wind chime. Next stop, the cart. Wooden wheels and zero suspension. If you thought Uber rides could get rough, you haven't sat in a prison cart from 1325. These carts were less vehicles, and more splinter boxes on wheels. No roof, no padding, just hard planks baking in the sun or soaked from last night's rain. And guess who's not allowed to sit? You. Prisoners often stood or crouched in the back, while the cart creaked and groaned through muddy streets, hitting every rut and stone like it was trying to shake your skeleton loose. There were no straps for safety, just a guy next to you vomiting from nerves, while another one mutters about rats eating people in the dark. And that smell, a mix of human fear, old vomit, manure, and iron rust. You get used to it after about 3 or 4 lifetimes. Oh, and I hope you like barefoot travel, because they didn't usually let you keep your shoes. Too risky, might have something hidden in there. A nail, a lockpick, or just plain comfort. Comfort wasn't allowed. The shame parade begins the worst part of the ride. It wasn't private. In fact, the whole thing was a parade. A slow, humiliating, soul-squashing march through the town square, where every bored villager suddenly finds something fascinating about your face. Kids point, old women gasp, market vendors make loud, judgmental comments about your hair. Some even throw things, not roses, more like rotten cabbage, or rocks. You might get lucky. Maybe someone in the crowd believes you're innocent and tosses you a crust of bread. Then again, maybe that crust's just bait to see if you flinch like a guilty person. People laugh, guards jeer, and if you're lucky enough to have been accused of something like witchcraft, oof, you'd better hope nobody has tomatoes. This wasn't just transportation, it was theater. The town got free entertainment, and you got a preview of just how bad things were about to get. Guards, not exactly gentlemen. Let's talk about the guards. These weren't chivalrous knights or kindly old watchmen with twinkling eyes. These were the guys who didn't make the cut for soldier life, but still really enjoyed pushing people around. Rough hands, bad breath, loud laughter at your expense. If you tripped on the way into the cart, laughed at. If you winced from the shackles digging into your wrists, laughed at harder. If you dared to cry, oh congratulations, you just became their new favorite joke. And don't expect helpful answers when you ask questions like, where are we going? Or what happens next? You'll probably get something like, oh, you'll see, followed by a wink that somehow makes you colder than the morning mist. And then, the gates after what feels like 3 decades of public shame, sore feet, and bouncing over every rock in the known kingdom, you finally arrive. The prison. Not a shining castle or a neat little building with clean signs and a bell on the door. Nah, this place looks like something a dragon might avoid. Towering stone walls, moss creeping down the sides like the place itself is rotting. A wooden gate that groans as it opens slowly, like it's trying to warn you. And those guards at the entrance, somehow worse than the ones who brought you. They don't speak. They stare, like they're trying to guess how long you'll last inside. Spoiler, not long. The cart stops. One guard hops down and barks for you to move. Your legs are half numb. From the ride, the shackles are cutting into your ankles. You take a step, trip and catch yourself on the edge of the cart. They laugh. One even mutters, hope the rats are hungry. Comforting. The crowd lingers. You'd think everyone would head home after the show. But nope. Some stay, just to watch you disappear into the darkness, to whisper about what they think you did, to bet on how long you'll survive. He's too soft. 3 days tops. She confessed by morning. Wonder if we'll hear the screams from here. And then, the door slams shut behind you, the light fades, and the real nightmare begins. A closing whisper. It's funny, isn't it? You haven't even stepped into your cell yet, and already your body hurts. Your dignity's gone, and the world feels colder. That was just the ride. No trial, no lawyer. Just you, a broken cart, and 100 eyes that all decided you were guilty before you said a word. Next time someone tells you the past was simpler, remind them of this little road trip. Because in a medieval prison system, surviving the journey in was just the first test. Chapter 4. The Welcome Committee. So, you've arrived. The prison gates have slammed shut behind you like a coffin lid. You're cold, sore, and probably smell like old carrots and fear. You'd think maybe now someone hands you a warm blanket, offers tea, and says, "Tough ride, huh?" Right? Yeah, not even close. This is where the real fun begins. Welcome to the Welcome Committee. Spoiler alert, they're not giving out cookies. Meet the guards. Picture this. You've barely taken a full step inside the prison when someone yells, "Move," and suddenly your shoulder meets a wall. Hard. Enter the guards. Now, medieval prison guards were not selected for their compassion. They weren't ex-nurses or retired grandpas who just wanted to stay busy. Nope. These were guys who probably kicked puppies before breakfast. Their hobbies included spitting, yelling, and inventing new ways to make prisoners miserable. Big boots, bigger beards, zero patience. They didn't wear name tags or uniforms, just layers of dirt, leather, and don't talk to me energy. Some had clubs. Some had whips. Most had that dead-eyed stare like they've seen things, and maybe caused them your job. Do not make eye contact. Ever strip. Please, not optional. The first thing they do, make you strip. Yep, all of it. Even if it's freezing. Even if your shirt is basically just a rag held together with luck and sadness. Off. They bark. No modesty. No privacy. Just you, standing there in your birthday suit, in front of 2 or 3 guards who are trying very hard not to laugh, or worse, are laughing. And why the strip down? They're not looking for fashion statements. They're looking for weapons, coins, notes, anything you might try to sneak in, including lice. Yes, lice checks were real. If you were lucky, it was just a visual scan. If not, bring out the razors. Getting shaved like a sheep, so now you're cold, confused, and naked, and guess what's next? The shave. Not a nice barbershop moment with warm towels and minty cream. No, this was more like someone dragging a dull blade across your scalp while muttering, "Hold still or lose an ear." Why shave people? Part of it was hygiene. Another part, humiliation. The more they stripped you of your identity, the easier it was to control you. You weren't a person anymore. You were inmate #. Probably going to cry tonight. And yeah, if you had a beard, say goodbye. That glorious beard you'd grown for 3 winters, gone in 10 seconds, followed by a guard laughing. Didn't suit you. Anyway, thanks, Greg. The search, aka let's make this awkward. Now comes the search. And when we say search, we don't mean just a pat on the back. Nope. This was a full hands-on inspection. Think of it like a bad airport security check, except with more yelling and zero personal boundaries. They checked your mouth, your ears, your armpits, let's just say everywhere. Because apparently, medieval folks believed prisoners could hide lockpicks in places you really don't want to think about. Any complaints? Too bad. One grunt from you, and it's accidental nitsuga time. Slaps, kicks, and spitting go. By now you're shaved, searched, and stripped of all dignity. And just when you think it can't get worse, it does. Welcome to the traditional greeting blows a classic combo of slaps, kicks, and maybe a swift elbow, just for flavor. Why? Simple. They wanted to remind you, you are no longer in charge of your life. One prisoner sneezed too loud. Smack. Another asked where the bathroom was. Boot to the thigh. One poor soul made eye contact. Slapped so hard he saw stars and medieval saints. And then there was the spit. Yes, spitting was basically a sport. Some guards did it for fun, others as a power move. Either way, it usually landed on your face, your chest, or worse, your mouth, which, by the way, had no mouthwash in sight. You're welcome. Say goodbye to personal belongings. That little locket you carried, gone. Your mom's scarf, gone. Even that crust of bread you snuck into your pocket, not only gone, but now it's lunch for a rat named Bernard in cell block B. Prisoners weren't allowed to keep anything. Even their clothes were taken and replaced with itchy, oversized rags that smelled like defeat and mildew. Basically, the medieval version of a one-size-fits-nobody jumpsuit. Thrown into darkness once the formalities were over, they didn't show you to a cozy cell with a bed and a view. No, you were dragged through narrow stone halls that echoed every footstep and scream. The deeper you went, the colder it got. The darker, the smell. Oh, it hit you like a wall. Like mold mixed with rot, mixed with sadness. And finally, they reached your cell. No key ceremony. No welcome. Please enjoy your stay. Just a shove, a clang of the iron door, and one last friendly word from the guard. Hope you like rats. A quick recap of this warm welcome. You arrive, sore, scared, and barefoot. Guards yell, slap, and strip you. You get searched like stolen treasure. Your hair, beard, and hope, all gone. You get spit on for breathing. They tossed you into a cell like a sack of potatoes. And this was just day one. A final thought by candlelight. Here's the thing. People talk about the good old days, about how justice was swift and life was simpler. But they forget about this part. The guards, the kicks, the fear in your chest when a man twice your size slaps you for sneezing, the feeling of cold stone on your bare feet, the echo of the door slamming shut. This wasn't justice. It was a system designed to break you before the real punishment even started. So next time someone says, "Back in my day, prisoners had it easy," just whisper this story back to them, and maybe spit on their shoe. You know historical accuracy. Chapter 5. The Cell. If you're lucky so, the guards have officially finished slapping you around, spitting on you, and robbing you of your dignity. Fun, right? Now it's time for your next stop in this medieval horror tour, your cell. Now, before we go inside, let's set one thing straight. If you're imagining a cozy little room with a bed, a candle, and a tiny barred window where moonlight shines through like a sad poem, you're in for a rude, very smelly awakening, because medieval cells, oh buddy, they were more like stone coffins with a door. Let's take a peek. The grand tour of sadness. The door creaks open, slowly, loudly. You already know nothing good happens after a sound like that. Inside, darkness. And not just "I forgot to turn the lights on" darkness. No, this is I-can single quotes T-hand-in-front-of-my-face-and-face-and-maybe -that-WASN single quotes T-my-hand. Darkness, the walls, cold, wet stone. You touch them and instantly regret it. It's like hugging a dead fish in the floor, either muddy or covered in something mysterious. Let's just agree to never identify that substance. There's no light. Maybe, a tiny slit in the wall that lets in a whisper of sunlight once a day, just enough to remind you how far you've fallen. Roommates included, no extra charge, so you thought you'd have your own cell. Please, medieval prisons were crowded, overcrowded, packed tighter than peas in a pot. You didn't get privacy, you got roommates, and not the cool, let's play cards and tell stories kind. Nope, more like a guy who hasn't bathed in 6 years. A woman who talks to the wall and names her lice. A pickpocket who steals your straw when you blink. Someone who might be dead, hard to tell. Personal space doesn't exist. You're shoulder to shoulder, nose to armpit, and surrounded by people who all smell like rotting cabbage and regret. Beds. What beds? Let's talk sleeping arrangements. There weren't any beds, that's it. No mattress, no blanket, no pillow. If you were lucky, the floor had a thin layer of old straw. Not fresh straw, not farmer's market straw. I'm talking damp, crusty, moldy straw that's been sneezed on, cried into, and possibly, well, let's say used by others. You lie down and immediately wonder if tetanus has a scent. Spoiler, it does. It smells exactly like this cell. Some prisoners would sleep sitting up. Others leaned against the wall. Some just didn't sleep because every time they closed their eyes, a rat ran across their leg. So yeah, sweet dreams. No toilet. You heard that right. You're probably asking, wait, where do people go to the bathroom? Huh, that's adorable. There wasn't a bathroom, not even a bucket, not even a dark corner officially labeled the pee spot. People just went wherever, whenever. And because the cell didn't get cleaned of it, built up over time, layers of human waste mixed with straw, blood, sweat, and tears. Literally, you didn't breathe through your nose, ever. Unless you wanted to throw up your soul. Let's talk about rats. Oh yes, the rats. They weren't like today's cute cartoon rats who cook in French kitchens. These were war-hardened, disease-carrying, human flesh-nibbling boss rats. Big, fast, bold. They weren't scared of you. You were scared of them. They ran across your chest while you slept. They fought each other in corners like tiny gladiators. And if someone in your cell died, well, let's just say rats were the first to find out. Some prisoners even named them. Why? Because it's either that or lose your mind. Good morning, Sir Choose-a-lot. Did you nibble my toe again last night? Classic you. Noise, smells, and constant misery. The sound never stops. Groaning, screaming, crying. Someone coughing so hard it echoes like thunder. Someone else singing songs with no words. A guy in the corner whispering to a spoon he doesn't actually have. And in between all that, drip, drip, drip. Water leaks from somewhere above. You don't know where. You'll never know where. But it drips. Always, forever, into your brain. As for smells, imagine sweaty humans, mixed with moldy straw, backed up by rat poop and sadness. That's your air now. You'll start hallucinating what fresh bread smells like. Then cry when you realize it's just someone sneezing near you. Injuries. Too bad. If you had wounds from your arrest or from a fellow cellmate, you didn't get bandages. Got a broken nose. Bite down on your sleeve and deal with it. Fever. Good luck. Toothache. Try yanking it out with a spoon. Oh wait, no spoons. There were no doctors. No ointments. Not even a priest most of the time. If you got sick, you either recovered through sheer willpower, or the rats planned your funeral. How long were you in there? Nobody told you. Prison sentences weren't exact. You didn't get a calendar with X's on it, or a cheerful warden saying, just 14 more days, champ. You waited, and waited, and waited. Some were in for days, some for years, some for years, some forever. No trial, no explanation. You were just there. Time melted. Your name faded. You became part of the cell. But hey, sometimes there was music. Okay, not good music. More like a random prisoner humming off-key for 6 hours straight. But in that darkness, even the weird stuff gave you something to hold on to. A beat, a rhythm, a reminder you're still alive. Barely. Closing thoughts. Rock bottom has rats. Let's wrap this chapter up. You weren't sleeping on a mattress. You were curled on a filthy floor, next to strangers, surrounded by rats, breathing in rot, trying to hold onto your sanity, one coughing fit at a time. This wasn't punishment. It was decay, slow, cruel, and relentless. And worst of all, you weren't even convicted yet. This was just the waiting room. Chapter 6. Your roommates are questionable, so you've made it into your medieval prison cell. Congrats. You've got straw that smells like wet goat. A rat the size of a puppy eyeing your toes. No pillow. No toilet. No idea what day it is. But wait, here's the best part. You're not alone. Yep, you've got roommates. And not just one or two. No, this isn't summer camp. This is overcrowded, disease-ridden, every man for himself, dungeon, chaos. And trust me, these cellmates, they're not your friendly neighborhood folk. Let's meet the crew, shall we? The murderer with the shifty eyes first up, over in the corner sharpening something that may or may not be a bone. The convicted murderer. Why is he in here? Well, that depends who you ask. He says he's innocent, but also, he keeps muttering about finishing what he started in his sleep. So, you decide. He doesn't say much, just stares a lot. You try not to make eye contact, or turn your back, or sleep too soundly. Fun fact, no one's sure if he's actually guilty, but everyone agrees he smells like rage and onions. The bread thief who talks too much next to him is someone far less terrifying, but way more annoying. The bread thief stole one loaf. One. And now he's been in here for 3 months, and he will not stop talking about it. Every day, I just wanted to feed my family, or they had too many loaves anyway, or this place really isn't gluten-free, huh? At first, you nod sympathetically, but by day 4, you're ready to strangle him with your own shackles. That guy with the rash, don't ask. You don't know his name. Nobody does. He just lies in the corner, scratching, constantly, all day, all night. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He might have the plague, or scurvy, or some cursed medieval skin disease that has no name. Either way, you've learned to sit far, far away. Except there is no far in this cell, just less close. The whisperer. Now we get to the creepy one. This guy doesn't talk during the day, just sits, stares at the wall, totally quiet. But when the lights go out and everyone's trying to sleep, he whispers. Not to anyone in particular, just out loud. Whispers about shadows, about ghosts, about the man under the straw. You really hope that's not a real person. And every so often he laughs, real slow, real cold. You've never prayed for sunrise harder in your life. The cougher this poor soul's been coughing since you got here. You've counted, every 3 minutes, like a metronome of misery, deep, rattling, lung-emptying coughs that echo through the stone. Everyone else groans, throws bits of straw at him. Nothing works. He might have consumption, or pneumonia, or just the worst seasonal cold in history. But in this place, a cough could be a death sentence for everyone. And guess what? There's no mask, no doctor, no personal space, just vibes and airborne disease. The actual plague victim, oh yeah. Let's talk about her. She came in 3 days ago, covered in sores, burning with fever, smelled like rot and vinegar. She's not coughing, she's not moving. In fact, is she still breathing? You're not sure, and you're not checking. You're already sharing a dirt floor with a guy who killed someone with a spoon, another who might be patient zero, and now this. You begin to understand why people in medieval prisons didn't last long. Privacy. Never heard of it. There's no such thing as alone time in here. Every sound, every smell, every bodily function, shared, witnessed, judged. You try to pee in the corner. Someone's already there. You want to lay down. Too bad. The bread thief is having an emotional breakdown on your straw patch. Even trying to think is a group activity. Someone's humming. Someone's sobbing. Someone else is eating something very crunchily, and you don't want to know what it is. The tension is constant at any moment. Things could go sideways. A fight could break out over a chunk of moldy bread, or a rumor that someone's getting released, or because someone accused someone else of stealing the lice off their shirt. There's no order, no guard stepping in to break it up. Just raw, primal tension. Every single hour, you sleep with one eye open. You eat with your back against the wall. You never ever trust someone who smiles too much. Alliances, maybe, but risky. Some prisoners form little alliances, mini-gangs, protection pacts, but trust is thin here. You share food with someone one day, and the next, they're trying to trade your shoes for a spoon. Betrayal is common. Loyalty is rare, and everyone's just trying to survive. So yeah, maybe you bond a little with the guy next to you, share some fleas, swap sad stories, but deep down, you know he'd sell you out for a cup of water and a boiled turnip. The nighttime symphony of madness. You'd think the worst part of prison would be the physical stuff, the hunger, the filth. But no, it's the nights. Because when darkness falls, the whole cell changes. Whispers, moans, scratching, crying, the sound of someone praying in Latin, someone laughing at nothing. Every once in a while, a scream, just one, then silence. You curl into yourself, close your eyes, try not to breathe too loud, and you wait for morning, if it ever comes. A final word on company. Medieval prisons didn't have classification systems. No minimum security or first-time offenders units. They threw everyone in the same room. Killers, thieves, sick people, drunks, innocents, nobles who fell out of favor, old women accused of witchcraft. No matter what you did or didn't do, you were just another body in a human stew of suffering. And even though you were all trapped together, it was the loneliest place in the world. Chapter 7. Hunger Games, Prison Food. Chanso, you're still alive in your lovely little medieval prison. You've met the murderers, the whisperers, the plague-ridden roommates. Great. Now comes the next big question. What's for dinner? Well, grab your wooden spoon and try not to cry, because welcome to the most depressing buffet in history. Let's talk about the menu first. Up bread, but not the fluffy kind, with butter and joy. Nope. We're talking about hard, stale, moldy bread that could double as a brick. If you threw it at a guard, he'd need stitches. This bread has been sitting in a damp storage room since last harvest. It smells like feet and tastes like disappointment. But hey, at least it has fiber. Right. Sometimes, if the jailer's feeling generous or bored, you might get soup. Bone soup, to be exact. Which sounds fancy, until you realize it's literally hot water with a bone in it. No meat, no salt, just bone. If you're lucky, there's maybe a scrap of carrot floating in there like it lost a bet. Oh, and portions. Laughable. A scoop of soup, half a slice of green bread, and boom, your day's calories. If you want seconds, too bad. This isn't an all you can eat. This is hope you don't faint by on water. Define drinkable. You're thirsty. Of course you are. Water's available. Technically. But it's not the clean mountain. Spring kind. It's the someone fetched this from the town ditch and strained it through their shirt kind. It's cloudy. It smells metallic. Sometimes it moves. Do you drink it? Yes, because dehydration is worse. But you also know that after one gulp, you'll probably spend the next week battling cramps, fevers, and visions of talking rats. Fun times, no food at all. That's also an option depending on the prison, the time of year, and whether the jailer hates your face. You might not get food at all. Some prisons had zero food budget. They expected you to have someone on the outside bring you meals. But remember, you've been disowned, forgotten, or accused of heresy. So your visitor list is pretty empty, which means no food, just air, dirt, and dreams of roasted chicken. Creative snacking. Desperate times call for desperate snacks. Let's talk rats. Not eating them yet, but watching them fight over moldy crusts in the corner. That's your dinner entertainment. If a rat dies, things get real awkward. Some prisoners stare, some walk away, and some grab the body. Yeah, hunger does that. People chew on leather straps, eat straw, suck on buttons. One guy once boiled his shoe twice, and if you had lice, you could try to eat those too. We don't recommend it, but medieval prisoners, they were past dignity. Hunger hallucinations, the real medieval dessert. After a few days of little to no food, your body starts to break down. Muscles ache, head throbs, you can't focus, you hear buzzing in your ears. Then the fun starts. You might see your mother, or a plate of apples floating in the air. Maybe you swear the whispering cellmate is now wearing a crown and offering you wine. You try to talk to him, he just stares and sneezes blood. Yep, hallucinations. Some folks thought they were divine visions. Others, just signs that your brain was eating itself. Either way, they don't fill your stomach, just make you cry more dramatically. Special days, surprise. It's worse sometimes. There were feast days, not for you, for the guards. They'd cook something rich and greasy and eat it just outside your cell. The smell would waft in. Roast goose, stew, fresh bread. You'd press your face to the bars, drooling, hoping for a scrap. Maybe they'd toss you a bone. Or maybe they'd laugh, throw it to the dog, and walk away. Depends on the guard's mood and how much wine he's had. Bribes for food. If you're lucky, food becomes currency. If you have anything to trade, you might get a crust from another prisoner, a button, a bit of string, a carved dice piece, even a song, if it's a good one. You learn fast. Kindness is rare, but desperation is common. Stealing food, risky. People have killed over half a turnip. Yes, half a turnip. Rotten food equals rotten body. Let's say you do manage to eat something. Congrats. Now comes the stomachache, the fever, the vomiting, maybe even a few worms for dessert. Food wasn't preserved well. Everything was either moldy, rotten, or infested with bugs. You ate fast and prayed it didn't kill you slower. Food poisoning wasn't just a bad night, it was a death sentence. And with no doctors, no medicine, and no sympathy, well, better hope your cellmate saves you some soup. Just kidding. He's chewing on the straw mattress again. Starvation. The slow execution. You wouldn't last long. In this system, most didn't. Starvation was a real cause of death. Quiet, lonely, no screams, just slower and slower breaths until you stopped waking up. Some prisoners welcomed it. Peace after weeks of hunger, cold, and pain. Others fought, licked mold off walls, ate paper, begged the guards, prayed for rats. In the end, food, or the lack of ITB, came the cruelest part of medieval prison life. Not the beatings, not the filth, just the slow erosion of hope and weight. Last thoughts before bed. So yeah, you probably wouldn't survive a day in a medieval prison. But if you did, it wouldn't be because you were brave or strong. It'd be because someone somewhere threw you a crust of bread and said, "Here, live another day," and you would, even if the bread tasted like misery. Chapter 8. Water, Disease, and Filtherite. So you've survived the rats, the stale bread, and the guy in the corner whispering to a rock he named Susan. Congrats, but don't get too cozy, because now we need to talk about hygiene, or more accurately, the complete and utter lack of it. Welcome to the filthiest chapter of your stay in a medieval prison. Let's dive in. Not literally, please. Bath. What's that? Let's start with the basics. Bathing. You didn't, ever. There were no baths, no buckets, no showers, no little lavender soap bars. The only water in that cell was probably dripping from the ceiling, or pooling under someone's foot. Some prisoners went months, even years, without washing. Their skin would crust over. Hair turned into one giant knot. Smell. Let's just say, if you stood too close to the bars, even the jailer gagged. And the worst part, you got used to it. Your nose gave up after a while, which sounds nice, until you realize everyone else still smells you. Let's talk about friends, lice, fleas, and bedbugs. Since you're not bathing, guess who moves in? Lice, fleas, bedbugs. Your skin becomes a free-range resort for creepy crawlers. They live in your clothes, in your straw bed if you have one, and in that one disgusting blanket everyone fights over. Itchy, of course, but scratching only makes it worse. Some prisoners ended up with infected wounds just from clawing at bites. Others just sat there, twitching all night like they were dancing with ghosts, and forget about getting rid of them. You can't wash your clothes. You can't boil water. All you can do is slap yourself and cry softly. Vermin Vacation Resort, remember the rats from earlier? Yeah, they're still here, and they've invited friends. Mice, roaches, centipedes, and things with too many legs that don't even have names. They crawl over your face while you sleep. They nibble at your food, and sometimes your feet. They build little families under your straw. Once in a while, someone tries to kill one with a rock. They miss. The rat laughs. You cry. Sores, rashes, and things that ooze. No bathing equals skin nightmares. You develop rashes, weird ones, big red splotches. Some ooze, some itch, some burn, some do all three. And remember, there are no doctors here, no ointments, just you, your cellmates, and one guy who swears rubbing onions on it works. Spoiler, it doesn't. Boils pop up, cuts get infected. Even the tiniest scratch could turn into something nasty. And if it gets bad enough, your hand starts to smell like soup. That's not good. Oh look, it's the plague. Now we get to the real horror show. Disease. Let's say a merchant somewhere coughed on a rat. That rat bit another rat. That rat sneaks into the jail. Now you have company. Medieval. Prisons were perfect breeding grounds for bubonic plague, aka the Black Death. Dark, damp, crowded, and full of hungry fleas. Sound familiar? If one prisoner got sick, the whole block got sick. Boils the size of eggs, high fever, vomiting, black patches on the skin, and then you die, fast, and loud, and gross. People screamed for hours. Some just dropped dead overnight. Guards stopped coming near the infected areas. They'd toss food through the bars and hope for the best. Fun fact, some prisoners survived the plague, but most, let's just say there were more rats than humans by the end. Rotting corpses and no cleanup crew. Let's say your bunkmate dies. Cool. Now you're sharing a cell with a corpse. Does the guard come in and remove it? Eventually, maybe, if he's feeling brave, or bored, or if the smell gets so bad it knocks him out. But for the first day or two, the body just lies there. Flies buzzing, fluids leaking, smell traveling, and you still have to eat your bone soup next to it. Cheers. Tooth decay and breath that can kill without hygiene. Your teeth are the first to go. Gums swell. Teeth loosen. You can't chew. Sometimes they fall out mid-sentence. And your breath, if you said hello to someone, you might actually stun them. One guard described a prisoner's mouth as smelling like the devil's outhouse. We don't know what that means, but we get the vibe. And if you had a tooth infection, good luck. That's a death sentence. The pain alone made people go mad. Some tried to yank their own teeth out with spoons or nails. Don't try that at home. You want a bath now, don't you? The weirdest thing, some prisoners dreamed of water, not lakes, not fountains, just a cup of clean water, a washcloth, a tiny bowl, anything. They would stare at cracks in the wall, imagining rivers. They'd whisper about rain like it was treasure. One guy reportedly cried for 3 hours when he saw a guard spill water on the floor. That's what filth does to your brain. It turns you into a person who would kill for a sponge. Closing thought before sleep if you dare. So now you're lying in your cell. It's dark. It stinks. You're itchy. You're bleeding from somewhere. You've got lice in your eyebrows and a rat chewing your shoe. You haven't bathed in 3 months. And the plague. It's probably knocking on the cell next door. Still think you'd survive one day in a medieval prison? Yeah, didn't think so. Chapter 9. Torture because, why not so? Let's say you've survived the stink, the rats, and whatever's growing between your toes. Great. Time to relax, right? Wrong. Because now the guards want something from you. A confession. Doesn't matter if you're guilty. Doesn't matter if they actually saw you steal the chicken or hex the cow. In medieval times, justice had a shall we say, creative approach. Confess, or we'll make you confess. Welcome to Chapter 9, also known as Let's Play Medieval Dentist, but with your entire body. Guilt, optional. Pain, guaranteed. Here's the deal. Medieval courts loved a good confession. It made things clean, official, and easier to write. In the town scrolls, he admitted it. Done. Next. Problem is, most people don't just shout yes. I totally summoned a demon during lunch, without some encouragement. That's where the torture came in. The idea, pain breaks resistance. Hurt someone long enough, and they'll say anything. Did it work? Sure. Was it honest? Nope. People confessed to crimes they didn't even understand. One guy confessed to being a werewolf. Another admitted to stealing a goat he never saw in his life. But once you're tied to a bench with metal clamps digging into your ankles, you'd confess to inventing fire. The rack. Stretch Armstrong. Medieval edition. Let's start with the big guy. The rack. Picture a long wooden table with rollers on each end. Now lie down. They tie your hands and feet with ropes, one on each side. Then they crank, slowly, until your arms and legs stretch. And stretch. Muscles tear. Joints pop. Ligaments snap, like cheap string. Eventually, your body literally gets longer, which sounds fun, until your shoulders are screaming and your hips feel like soup. People passed out from the pain. Some died. Others were so disfigured afterward they couldn't walk. One guy confessed to burning down a church while he was 8 years old. Didn't matter. The rack got the words out. Thumbscrews because fingers are overrated, too busy for the full body stretch. Try thumbscrews, a quick, portable, super charming little device. It's a small vise with grooves that hold your fingers or toes. Then they twist, crunch, crunch, snap, bones shatter, skin splits. You scream so hard you see colors that don't exist. Best part, it could be done in front of other prisoners. As a little warning, like, see this. Say nothing and your fingers become jelly too. Fun team building exercise. Iron boots, fashionably fatal now. If you were rich or important, they might give you the iron boots. Picture your feet in metal shoes. Then they heat the metal with fire. Your skin boils, blisters form, and soon your feet look like overcooked sausages. Sometimes they poured molten lead into the boots. Let that sink in. Your feet turn to ash. Inside metal casing, and if you pass out, they wake you up with water and keep going. Yup, all for that sweet, sweet confession. The pear of anguish, no, not fruit, this one's special. It's called the pear of anguish. Sounds poetic, right? Nope, it's a metal device shaped like a pear, with petals that expand outward. They shove it into, well, your mouth, or worse other places. Then they crank it. The pear opens, wider and wider, breaking your jaw, or tearing parts of your body no one should ever tear. Why? Maybe you lied. Maybe you gossiped. Maybe the torturer just had a bad day. That's medieval justice for you. Oops, you sneezed near a noblewoman. Time for the pear. Iron Maiden, real or just vibes? Ah yes, the Iron Maiden. Spiky metal coffin, you get shoved inside, and the spikes pierce but don't kill unless they wanted to. Here's the twist though. Many historians now think the Iron Maiden wasn't actually used in medieval times, but invented later for museum drama. But hey, it still shows up in every creepy castle exhibit, so we're giving it a moment. Whether real or not, the idea was simple. Lock you inside with spikes aimed just enough to bleed. Slowly, a slow, painful death, while the town pretends it's justice. 10/10ths, would not recommend. Water torture, not the spa kind. You're strapped down, your head tilted back, a cloth over your face. Then they pour water endlessly, your nose and throat. It's called waterboarding now, but they used it back then too. You feel like you're drowning. Your body panics. You gasp, but breathe in nothing but soaked cloth. Some people broke in seconds. Others endured minutes. That felt like hours. And the worst part, no scars, just trauma. Neat, huh? You're screaming, and nobody cares. Imagine you're tied to a post. Bones breaking, blood pooling, teeth gone. And through the bars, you see other prisoners, watching, quiet, not because they don't care, but because they know they're next. That's the real horror of medieval torture. It wasn't just the pain, it was the silence after. The knowledge that everyone would eventually take their turn, whether they did anything wrong or not. Your torturer has a job to do. You might think the torturer was some cackling maniac with a hunchback and bad teeth, but no. Usually, it was the executioner. Same guy who hangs you, burns you, or chops your head off. This was just another part of his job description. And the scariest part, he was good at it. He knew just how much pain to give without killing you. He knew how to twist the rack just enough. He might even whisper, "Sorry, I have to," as he cracks your fingers one by one. That's worse than screaming. Honestly. Final thought before you pass out. So yeah, in medieval prisons, torture wasn't a last resort. It was step one. Confess first, ask questions later. You didn't need to be guilty, just unlucky, poor, or near the wrong person. And once you were strapped to the bench, your only real crime was still breathing. Chapter 10. Daily routine, or the lack thereof. So you've made it this far. You survived the arrest, the rattly cart ride, the welcome slap, the rats, the smell, the screaming, the confess, or we stretch your spine bit. Good for you. Now what? Nothing. Seriously, that's the answer. Welcome to your new daily routine, where the only rule is, there are no rules. Time, what's that? Let's start with time. You remember time, right? Breakfast at 8, lunch at noon. That cozy little voice in your head that says, "Ah yes, it's 3 p.m. time for a snack." Yeah, forget all of that. In a medieval prison, there were no clocks, no bells, no guards announcing the hours. Just endless, foggy, miserable hours smushed together like rotten potatoes in a sack. You'd wake up if you slept at all and have no idea whether it was morning or midnight. The only clues were the sound of church bells in the distance, or the rats being a bit more aggressive. That's it. That's how you kept track. One guy swore it was Friday for 2 straight weeks. Another thought he'd been there a month. Out it was only 3 days. Time got weird, fast. The routine, scream, moan, repeat. Let's talk structure, because every productive day needs structure, right? In prison, here's your schedule. Wake up to a scream. Wait, listen to someone moaning. More screaming. Some awkward silence. Then the sound of someone throwing up in the corner. And that's just before your first imaginary breakfast. The daily routine was chaos mixed with boredom. You'd sit, then lie down, then stand, then sit again. Sometimes you'd count bricks, or scratch tally marks into the wall, or name the lice on your leg just to stay sane. Kevin the lice was a real buddy. Meals, if they remembered you didn't. Get breakfast at sunrise or dinner at sunset. You got food when and if the guards remembered you were still alive. Some days they just didn't. Other days, a guard might toss in a bowl of cold slop, like he's feeding a very large, very unlucky hamster. And don't expect variety. One day it's bread. The next day, also bread. Third day, bread but slightly greener. If it wasn't moldy, it was a trap. Why is this bread soft? Oh no, toilet breaks. Funny joke, let's talk. Bathroom. Spoiler, there wasn't one. If you were lucky, there was a hole in the floor. Unlucky, you just picked a corner. That corner, already taken. Which means the smell inside the cell was a mix of sweat, mold, fear, and centuries of digestive disappointment. You didn't need to see the mess. Your nose told you everything. And remember, no windows, no fresh air. Just a bunch of people slowly becoming one with their own filth. Guards, sometimes there, usually not. Now here's the weird part. You'd think a prison would be crawling with guards, right? Nope. Sometimes, you wouldn't see a single one for days. Why? Because most guards didn't care. They did their rounds, threw in some food or didn't, and vanished. And when they did show up, they were either angry, drunk, or looking for someone to smack around for fun. One guy got kicked just for sneezing too loud. Bless you, now bash you. The entertainment, you know what passes for entertainment in a medieval prison. Watching rats fight over a toe someone lost during the night. Listening to your cellmate hum the same off-key tune for 8 hours straight. Or better yet, trying to make a chessboard out of bits of straw and rock. Sometimes, if you were really desperate, you'd argue with the voices in your head. Or pretend to be on a cooking show. Today, we're making soup. Step 1. Find water. Just kidding. There is none. Sleeping. Let's not get crazy, you'd think. With nothing else to do, at least you could sleep. But nope. Sleeping in medieval prison was like trying to nap on a bed of gravel, while people screamed in your ear, and rats nibbled your socks, and someone 3 feet away coughed like they had every disease ever discovered. Some prisoners went days without sleep. Some had hallucinations. One guy claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to him and told him the rats were angels. Whatever helps you cope, I guess. Loneliness, then sudden violence. Here's the worst part. The emotional whiplash. You could go 12 hours hearing absolutely nothing, just your own thoughts echoing around your skull. Then bam, fist fight in the hallway, screaming, a door slams, someone's being dragged. You hear chains, you hear pleading, then it goes quiet again, like nothing ever happened. And you're left thinking, is this what hell sounds like? Probably. Some days, you were forgotten entirely. There were prisoners who literally disappeared in their cells. Not because of magic, but because the guards forgot they were there. Records got lost. Guards changed shifts. People died and no one noticed. You could rot for weeks, maybe even months, without anyone realizing. No trials, no food, no human contact, just fading. One old tale tells of a man arrested for unpaid taxes. He was tossed into a cell and left. Years later, they opened the door during renovations, found a skeleton still chained to the wall. Oops, the final thought. This was normal. Here's the scary thing. This wasn't punishment for murder or arson. Sometimes it was just for stealing bread, or being accused of heresy, or being in the wrong place. And yet, once you were inside, your daily routine was simple. Stay alive. Don't scream too much. Don't get bitten. Don't go crazy yet. That's it. So if anyone ever tells you prison toughens you up, ask if they've ever hallucinated their bread into being a talking owl named Reginald. Because in medieval prison, that was the most normal part of the day. Chapter 11. Light, sound, and losing your mind. So, you've been in your lovely medieval prison cell for a while now. You've made friends with a rat named Jeff. You've lost all sense of time. Your clothes smelled like wet despair. What could possibly go wrong next? Well, let's talk about light and sound, and how both, when used just wrong enough, can absolutely break your brain. Total darkness, your new best friend. Imagine waking up and not being able to see anything. Not your hands, not your cellmate, not even the rats doing gymnastics across your feet. That's medieval prison for you. No windows, no lanterns. Number cozy candle in the hallway vibe. Just pitch black nothing. You know that kind of dark, where your eyes are open, and you're still not sure they are. That's it. And the worst part, you start seeing things that aren't there. A flicker of movement in the corner, a shadow that breathes, your dead grandma whispering advice about soup recipes. It wasn't just creepy, it was mind-melting. Your brain gets bored without light, so it makes up stuff. Faces in the wall, glowing rats. One guy claimed his straw pillow started talking to him. Honestly, it probably had better conversation than his cellmate. Now flip the switch to much light, but let's say you got lucky and your cell had a torch nearby. Oh joy, except it's not gentle, golden firelight. It's a blazing, eye-burning, flickery inferno stuck in a sconce 5 feet from your eyeballs. You can't look at it, you can't sleep near it, but you also can't escape it. Ever tried napping with the sun in your face and no eyelids? One prisoner described the torchlight as a devil's eye that never blinks. Poetic, but also true. The flickering light would cast wild shadows. Things didn't stay still. The walls looked like they breathed. Your cellmate's face would twist in the firelight, and suddenly he looked like a demon. Sleep, not happening. Comfort, please. Sanity, ha. Enter the drip. If there's one sound that can slowly, cruelly, destroy a man, it's dripping water. Drip, drip. Now, imagine it doesn't stop. Ever. It echoes, it dances off stone. It sneaks into your head like a mosquito in a metal room. You try to ignore it. You fail. One guy shoved straw in his ears. Didn't help. Another tried to hum to drown it out. Got punched for being annoying. And the worst version, drip torture. They'd tie a person down and let water drip on the same spot of their forehead for hours, sometimes days. It didn't hurt. It just made you lose your mind. Echoes of despair and farts. Now let's talk echoes. Every noise in a dungeon bounced around. A guard coughed 2 corridors over. Sounds like he's in your lap. A scream from 3 cells down. Suddenly, it's your scream too. Someone lets out a fart in the dark. Everyone hears it, and blames you. There was no privacy, no peace, just a surround sound nightmare of agony, confusion, and medieval indigestion. And the sounds weren't just constant. They were weird moans, prayers, soft muttering, chains clinking, sometimes silence. And somehow, that was worse. Because silence in prison meant something just ended, or something horrible was about to start. losing it slowly, or quickly, put it all together. You can't see, or you see too much. You hear crying that might be yours. The torchlight keeps blinking like it's trying to hypnotize you. And every now and then, the rats hold a conference at your feet. Yeah, you'd go crazy. Some prisoners talked to ghosts. Some scratched stories into the walls with their teeth. One guy named all his toes and held arguments with them. Mental breakdowns weren't rare, they were expected. And you know the real kicker. No one cared. Guards didn't check on you like, "Hey buddy, mental health check-in." Nah, if you started talking to bricks, they just walked faster past your cell. Sensory breakdown, a medieval feature. Modern prisoners talk about sensory deprivation. It's a whole science now. Back then, it wasn't science. It was just normal. Prison wasn't about time served. It was about slowly breaking you from the inside. You couldn't tell day from night. You couldn't sleep or eat properly. You forgot what trees looked like. Forgot what your own face looked like. You lost the concept of normal. Some people came out of prison and just couldn't handle life. Sunlight made them panic. Laughter made them cry. Food made them suspicious. They weren't being dramatic. They were just broken. Fun fact, some didn't mind now. Weirdly enough, some prisoners got used to it. They found a rhythm in the madness. They'd talk to the shadows, sing with the drips, watch the flicker on the wall like it was a Netflix show. These people weren't okay, but they adapted. And that's kind of beautiful and terrifying. Because when humans start to accept the dungeon as normal, yeah, that's when you know society's doing great. Closing thought. It wasn't just the chains, so next time someone says, "I could have survived one day in a medieval prison," ask them, could you sleep on moldy straw while rats dance across your chest? Could you handle a week of torchlight burning your eyes? Could you listen to a stranger sob for 12 hours straight without losing it? Because in the end, the torture wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was just the drip, the dark, the whispers, and those were the things that really broke you. Chapter 12. Let's talk sanitation, or don'tal right. We've talked about rats, we've talked about screaming, we've talked about torture and shadows and weird noises in the dark. But tonight, we tackle a subject even more horrifying, more traumatizing, more smelly. Yep, we're talking about sanitation, or, as the medieval prison called it, what's that? So, where's the bathroom? Short answer, there isn't one. You might be thinking, surely they had some kind of medieval toilet system, right? Wrong. There was no plumbing, no bathrooms, no privacy, no hold on, I need to go freshen up. The medieval toilet was either a bucket, already halfway full, a hole in the corner, surrounded by regret, or nowhere at all. That's right. Sometimes, if the guards didn't give you a bucket, you just had to pick a spot in the room and go. Yes, it's as nasty as it sounds. The smell hits. First, before you even saw your cell, you smelled it. It wasn't just bad, it was evil. A thick wall of scent slapped you the second you stepped through the dungeon gates. It wasn't one smell either. It was layers of horror, rotting straw, human waste mold, damp stone, and something that can only be described as wet shoe meats, corpse stew. Your nose stopped working after a few minutes. Not because it got used to it. It gave up. Even prisoners with the strongest stomachs ended up dry heaving in a corner on day one. Fun welcome party. Huh. Bucket politics now. Let's say you were one of the lucky ones and your cell had a bucket. Great. Right. Wrong again. That bucket was shared by everyone in the cell. No lid. No changing it daily. No magical cleaning spell. Just a sad wooden container full of, let's say, emotions. And guess what? You had to sleep next to it, maybe even beside it, depending on how crowded the cell was. Sometimes the bucket tipped over. Sometimes a rat fell in. Sometimes someone missed completely. It was chaos. It was awful. And it was life. No cleaning crew coming, you might be wondering. Well, how often did they clean the prison? Never. There were no janitors, no maids, no guy with a mop, and good intentions. Waste built up. Straw rotted. Walls turned dark with, let's not guess, and when it rained, oh boy, flooded cells. Everything soggy. All the contents of the floor came to visit your toes. One chronicler described a prison floor as a swamp of human decay. Romantic, isn't it? Clothes. More like stink blankets. You didn't get a change of clothes. What you wore when you were arrested, that was your outfit. Forever. and it soaked up everything. Sweat, dirt, blood, pee, yours or someone else's. Good luck figuring that out. And the ever-present ode of misery. Your clothes became part of your identity, like armor but made of sadness. Some people tried to rinse their clothes with rainwater, if they were lucky. Others just let the smell blend into the dungeon's aroma theme. Bathing, LOL, bathing in prison. Don't make me laugh. There were no bathtubs, no soap, no warm water. You cleaned yourself with rain puddles. Your imagination. Most people didn't even bother. What was the point? If everyone smells like rot, no one notices your unique brand of filth. One prisoner claimed he had maggots living in his armpit after 2 years. Another had mushrooms growing in his shoe. Yes, that happened. Nature finds a way. Toothbrush. Never met her. Don't even ask about dental hygiene. Your teeth slowly turned yellow, then brown, then gone. People's breath could kill flies. Gums rotted. Teeth fell out. And if you got a toothache, well, no dentist, no meds. Just scream into the darkness until you passed out. Prisoners looked like zombies, smelled like bogs, and felt like death warmed over. Honestly, that's being too nice. How it affected everyone, even the guards. And get this, Evan, the guards hated it. Some wore cloth over their faces just to go near the cells. Others lit incense or herbs to mask the smell. Spoiler, it didn't work. Many just held their breath, threw food in, and ran away like scared chickens. Some guards even passed out. That's how you know it was bad, when the guy torturing you can't stand the stink. Disease had a party here. We can't talk sanitation without talking disease. The filth made it easy for all the medieval plagues to have a field day. Dysentery, lice infestations, skin infections, eye diseases, and of course, our old friend, the bubonic plague, when prisoners died of sickness, which was all the time. Sometimes, their bodies just stayed in the cell for a day or two. No one rushed to remove them. They'd just lie there and rot next to you. Sweet dreams. Closing thought. The real punishment, here's the thing. Medieval prisons didn't need high-tech security. They didn't need electric fences or high walls. The stink did all the work. It crushed your spirit, turned your stomach, made you forget what clean even meant. People begged to be executed just to escape the stench. So next time you complain about a public bathroom, remember this chapter, remember the bucket, and be grateful you don't live in a time where peeing in a hall with 10 strangers was considered lucky. Chapter 13. Rats, roaches, and crawling things. All right. You've survived arrest, ride to prison, dungeon, welcome, rotting food, darkness, and no plumbing. High five. But the true VIPs of medieval prison life are the creatures you didn't invite yet. They've moved in permanently. That's right. It's time to meet your new flatmates. Rats big enough to qualify as guard dogs, roaches auditioning for world domination, lice throwing block parties in your hair, and other guests you'll regret ever meeting. Let's get crawling. Rats, the unofficial cell guards. Imagine you've finally managed to lie down on your moldy straw. You're dozing, dreaming of clean socks. When you feel it, something nibbling your toe. You open one eye. They're illuminated by a single torch. Is a rat the size of a small dog. It looks up at you with beady eyes, like it's deciding if you taste like stew or chicken. Rats in medieval prisons were everywhere. Walls, floors, ceilings. Your cell was their kingdom, and you were just furniture. They'd scamper over you, fight each other for scraps, even squeak at you if you got too close. You tried shooing them off. They bit back. 1 bite is no big deal. 2 bites in the same spot, however, might get infected. And remember Chapter 8, infection plus no doctor equals not great. Some prisoners got so used to it they named them Jeffrey, the great nibbler, Lady Whiskers, Thor, god of tiny teeth. Naming them didn't make them stop. It just made you feel a little less crazy. Roaches, the true co-offenders. If rats were big threats, roaches were the stealthy ninjas of the dungeon. No one heard them. You just noticed a roach in your soup, or stuck to your bread, or crawling out of your sleeve. They weren't picky. They lived in cracks, ceilings, even inside cracks in the stone. One prisoner admitted to catching one, roasting it on a shard of pottery, and eating it. Desperation has a flavor. Roaches carried diseases. They spread filth. But to see one run across your face at night, that's the stuff of nightmares. People tried smashing them. Didn't work. They split in 2 and kept crawling. Eventually, you just accepted them. They were part of the decor. Lice parties all night. Every night now, let's talk lice. These guys are tiny, but they pack a punch. Once they got in your hair, you were there or look and eat buffet. Scratch, scratch, scratch. That was your life. The moment you closed your eyes, it was an open invitation. Some prisoners braided their hair really tight, hoping to starve them out. Others tried burning them with candles not recommended. A few tried lice shampoo made from herbs, if they could get any. Spoiler, it rarely worked. Lice laid eggs, nits. They climbed onto your clothes. They jumped. They dunked. They partied. And every so often, you'd pick one off your eyelid and quietly weep. Maggots, mites, and mystery creepers, rats, roaches, and lice were the big three. But the dungeon also had maggots, feasting on, well, things best left unspoken, mites, crawling in your clothes, seam centipedes, inching across your ankle flesh, buzzing over sores you didn't know which was worse. Each had a special talent for making you itch, burn, or want to scream. One prisoner claimed he found a tick on his tongue. Another said a spider spun a silk hammock in his beard. Everyone else just laughed, or threw straw at him, or both. Coexistence, or total war. After weeks of this, you learn to coexist, or you try. You sleep with the rats on one side. You cover your head so lice can't bite your scalp. You tie your clothes in knots so roaches can't hide. And you build a little shrine to Saint Arnold, patron saint of gross survival. Sometimes you even make peace. Offer a scrap of bread to the rats. They stopped biting you for a day. Smash a roach for sport. Pluck a lice from your eyebrow and show it off like a trophy. Small victories in a filthy war. When the creatures become company, there are stories of prisoners talking to their bug roommates in the dark. Hey Jeff, got any news from the north corner? Shut up, Mary. You look ridiculous. It was lonely enough that having tiny friends, no matter how disgusting, felt better than nothing. One guy carved tiny doors in the wall for his personal rat, Sir Nibbles. Another gave a lice the title of Chief Night Guard. It's weird to admit, but in the dungeon, the unloved creatures were sometimes the only living things you could count on. Even if they were trying to eat you, disease carriers and living plagues. Here's the brutal truth. These vermin weren't just irritating, they were deadly. Rats carried fleas, fleas carried plague, roaches carried dysentery, lice carried typhus. Every bite, every brush was a potential death sentence. In Chapter 8, we saw how disease ran rampant, but that was mostly plague. Here, we're talking bug-borne disasters, fevers, rashes, swellings, and worse. Some prisoners died, not from torture, not from hunger, but from an itsy-bitsy spider bite that got infected, or a rat's tooth. The dungeon wasn't just a cage. It was a cocktail of diseases waiting to drown you. A final creepy crawly thought, so the next time you see a rat in your kitchen, a roach in your sink, or a flea on your pet, count your blessings. Because in a medieval prison, rats, roaches, and crawling things were the true wardens. They decided who stayed awake, who got infected, who lost their mind, and, very often, who died. And the worst part, they didn't need swords or chains, just a single bite. Chapter 14. Prison Fashion. What you wore, and why it was awful. So far you've met the rats, survived the stink, and even lost count of tortured toes. But there's one more vital survival detail we haven't covered.
What
were you wearing? Spoiler, it wasn't your favorite tunic, or comfy leggings, or that battle-worn armor you swear made you look heroic. No, prison fashion was, well, let's just say it was exclusive to misery. Torn clothes, or nothing at all when you were arrested. The guards stripped you down. They took your cloak, your boots, your belts, your belt, everything that made you. You, if you were lucky, you got to keep your undergarments. If not, they tossed those too. What came next was a sad little pile of rags. Actually, more like a rag at best, an oversized, torn tunic that hung off you like a wet sail. No seams matched. Holes everywhere. You could see daylight peek through the left shoulder. Sometimes the prison didn't even bother with clothes. They just left you naked in the corner, shivering, hugging yourself, wondering what modesty was. Anymore, one prisoner painted a smiley face on his thigh with soot, just to feel fancy. We're guessing the guards didn't appreciate the effort. Winter. Good luck. Imagine it's January. Snow clings to the bars. Wind howls down the corridor, like someone dragging a sled of bones. Your body tries to curl around itself. But there's no blanket, no fire, maybe not even a straw pile. Prisoners tried layering rags. 2 tunics, 3, it did nothing. Your teeth chattered. Your nose dripped. Your toes felt like frozen peas. Some prisoners huddled together for warmth. Some lay sprawled on the stone, convincing themselves sleep would be warmer than reality. One guy tried wrapping himself in a stolen guard's cloak, got caught and lost both cloak and dignity. In summer, it was sweat. In winter, it was ice. Year-round prison style. Suffering chic. No shoes, no mercy footwear. Ha, that's a funny word here. When they took your shoes, they took your last line of defense against the floor's horrors. Sharp pebbles, splinters, cold stone. Some prisoners tried wrapping feet in cloth scraps. Others went barefoot and swore they could feel every rat claw or cold droplet hitting their soles. One legend says a prisoner lost not just his boots, but an entire toe chasing a rat. Doesn't say whether he caught it. Probably not. Your feet ended up covered in blisters, sores, and mysteries you didn't want to know about. But hey, no shoes, no WD-40, no problem. Medieval prison fashion at its finest. Blankets. Optional, almost never provided, you might ask. Couldn't I get a blanket answer? Kinda. Blankets existed. They were a luxury. They were tax-exempt items for nobles. Prisoners got leftovers, thin scraps of wool or old tapestries, often stolen from church pews or tanneries. But do they give them to you? Not usually. If you begged, bullied, or bribed a guard, maybe. But most guards laughed and said, "Cold. Should have thought of that before you stole the chicken." So blankets were either pooled if you made friends, or fought over if you were desperate. Worst case, you woke up tangled in a half-rotten blanket, wondering if it was worth the trade. Layers of filth, the ultimate accessory by month 2. Your clothes weren't just rags. They were part of the cell's ecosystem. They absorbed body odor, dirt, blood, animal droppings, and of course, the general stench of despair. Changing clothes, never washing. Stroking the rags and wishing for fresh fabric. Sometimes, you might try shaking your tunic outside the bars, hoping some crumbs or lice would fall off. Guards either told you to stop or laughed and said, "Congratulations, you've just made everything stickier." Your clothes became a second skin you couldn't shed. And when you died, they wrapped you in those same rags for burial. Some prisoners joked, "At least I stayed in style." Prison tattoos and scar marks, since clothes were ragged. Some prisoners decorated their bodies instead. They carved initials into their arms, tattooed crosses on their chests. People begged to be executed just to escape the stench. So next time you complain about a public bathroom, remember this chapter, remember the bucket, and be grateful you don't live in a time where peeing in a hall with 10 strangers was considered lucky. Chapter 13. Rats, roaches, and crawling things. All right. You've survived arrest, ride to prison, dungeon, welcome, rotting food, darkness, and no plumbing. High five. But the true VIPs of medieval prison life are the creatures you didn't invite yet. They've moved in permanently. That's right. It's time to meet your new flatmates. Rats big enough to qualify as guard dogs, roaches auditioning for world domination, lice throwing block parties in your hair, and other guests you'll regret ever meeting. Let's get crawling. Rats. The unofficial cell guards imagine you've finally managed to lie down on your moldy straw. You're dozing, dreaming of clean socks. When you feel it, something nibbling your toe. You open one eye. They're illuminated by a single torch. Is a rat the size of a small dog. It looks up at you with beady eyes like it's deciding if you taste like stew or chicken. Rats in medieval prisons were everywhere. Walls, floors, ceilings. Your cell was their kingdom, and you were just furniture. They'd scamper over you, fight each other for scraps, even squeak at you if you got too close. You tried shooing them off. They bit back. One bite is no big deal. 2 bites in the same spot, however, might get infected. And remember Chapter 8, infection plus no doctor equals not great. Some prisoners got so used to it they named them Jeffrey, the great nibbler, Lady Whiskers, Thor, god of tiny teeth. Naming them didn't make them stop. It just made you feel a little less crazy. Roaches, the true co-offenders. If rats were big threats, roaches were the stealthy ninjas of the dungeon. No one heard them. You just noticed a roach in your soup, or stuck to your bread, or crawling out of your sleeve. They weren't picky. They lived in cracks, ceilings, even inside cracks in the stone. One prisoner admitted to catching one, roasting it on a shard of pottery, and eating it. Desperation has a flavor. Roaches carried diseases. They spread filth. But to see one run across your face at night, that's the stuff of nightmares. People tried smashing them. Didn't work. They split in two and kept crawling. Eventually, you just accepted them. They were part of the decor. Lice parties all night. Every night now, let's talk lice. These guys are tiny, but they pack a punch. Once they got in your hair, you were there or look and eat buffet. Scratch, scratch, scratch. That was your life. The moment you closed your eyes, it was an open invitation. Some prisoners braided their hair really tight, hoping to starve them out. Others tried burning them with candles not recommended. A few tried lice shampoo made from herbs, if they could get any. Spoiler, it rarely worked. Lice laid eggs, nits. They climbed onto your clothes. They jumped. They dunked. They partied. And every so often, you'd pick one off your eyelid and quietly weep. Maggots, mites, and mystery creepers, rats, roaches, and lice were the big three. But the dungeon also had maggots, feasting on, well, things best left unspoken, mites, crawling in your clothes, seam centipedes, inching across your ankle flesh, buzzing over sores you didn't know which was worse. Each had a special talent for making you itch, burn, or want to scream. One prisoner claimed he found a tick on his tongue. Another said a spider spun a silk hammock in his beard. Everyone else just laughed, or threw straw at him, or both. Coexistence, or total war. After weeks of this, you learn to coexist, or you try. You sleep with the rats on one side. You cover your head so lice can't bite your scalp. You tie your clothes in knots so roaches can't hide. And you build a little shrine to Saint Arnold, patron saint of gross survival. Sometimes you even make peace. Offer a scrap of bread to the rats. They stopped biting you for a day smash. A roach for sport. Pluck a lice from your eyebrow and show it off like a trophy. Small victories in a filthy war. When the creatures become company, there are stories of prisoners talking to their bug roommates in the dark. Hey Jeff, got any news from the North Corner? Shut up, Mary. You look ridiculous. It was lonely enough that having tiny friends, no matter how disgusting, felt better than nothing. One guy carved tiny doors in the wall for his personal rat, Sir Nibbles. Another gave a lice the title of Chief Night Guard. It's weird to admit, but in the dungeon, the unloved creatures were sometimes the only living things you could count on. Even if they were trying to eat you, disease carriers and living plagues. Here's the brutal truth. These vermin weren't just irritating, they were deadly. Rats carried fleas, fleas carried plague, roaches carried dysentery, lice carried typhus. Every bite, every brush was a potential death sentence. In Chapter 8, we saw how disease ran rampant, but that was mostly plague. Here, we're talking bug-borne disasters, fevers, rashes, swellings, and worse. Some prisoners died, not from torture, not from hunger, but from an itsy-bitsy spider bite that got infected, or a rat's tooth. The dungeon wasn't just a cage. It was a cocktail of diseases waiting to drown you. A final creepy crawly thought, so the next time you see a rat in your kitchen, a roach in your sink, or a flea on your pet, count your blessings. Because in a medieval prison, rats, roaches, and crawling things were the true wardens. They decided who stayed awake, who got infected, who lost their mind, and, very often, who died. And the worst part, they didn't need swords or chains, just a single bite. Chapter 14. Prison fashion, what you wore, and why it was awful. So far you've met the rats, survived the stink, and even lost count of tortured toes. But there's one more vital survival detail we haven't covered.
What
were you wearing? Spoiler, it wasn't your favorite tunic, or comfy leggings, or that battle-worn armor you swear made you look heroic. No, prison fashion was, well, let's just say it was exclusive to misery. Torn clothes, or nothing at all when you were arrested. The guards stripped you down. They took your cloak, your boots, your belts, your belt, everything that made you. You, if you were lucky, you got to keep your undergarments. If not, they tossed those too. What came next was a sad little pile of rags. Actually, more like a rag at best, an oversized, torn tunic that hung off you like a wet sail. No seams matched. Holes everywhere. You could see daylight peek through the left shoulder. Sometimes the prison didn't even bother with clothes. They just left you naked in the corner, shivering, hugging yourself, wondering what modesty was. Anymore, one prisoner painted a smiley face on his thigh with soot, just to feel fancy. We're guessing the guards didn't appreciate the effort. Winter. Good luck. Imagine it's January. Snow clings to the bars. Wind howls down the corridor, like someone dragging a sled of bones. Your body tries to curl around itself, but there's no blanket, no fire, maybe not even a straw pile. Prisoners tried layering rags, 2 tunics, 3, it did nothing. Your teeth chattered, your nose dripped, your toes felt like frozen peas. Some prisoners huddled together for warmth. Some lay sprawled on the stone, convincing themselves sleep would be warmer than reality. One guy tried wrapping himself in a stolen guard's cloak, got caught and lost both cloak and dignity. In summer, it was sweat. In winter, it was ice. Year-round prison style, suffering chic. No shoes, no mercy footwear. Ha, that's a funny word here. When they took your shoes, they took your last line of defense against the floor's horrors. Sharp pebbles, splinters, cold stone. Some prisoners tried wrapping feet in cloth scraps. Others went barefoot and swore they could feel every rat claw or cold droplet hitting their soles. One legend says a prisoner lost not just his boots, but an entire toe chasing a rat. Doesn't say whether he caught it. Probably not. Your feet ended up covered in blisters, sores, and mysteries you didn't want to know about. But hey, no shoes, no WD-40, no problem. Medieval prison fashion at its finest. Blankets. Optional, almost never provided, you might ask. Couldn't. I get a blanket answer. Kinda. Blankets existed. They were a luxury. They were tax-exempt items for nobles. Prisoners got leftover thin scraps of wool or old tapestries, often stolen from church pews or tanneries. But do they give them to you? Not usually. If you begged, bullied, or bribed a guard, maybe. But most guards laughed and said, "Cold. Should have thought of that before you stole the chicken." So blankets were either pooled if you made friends, or fought over if you were desperate. Worst case, you woke up tangled in a half-rotten blanket, wondering if it was worth the trade. Layers of filth, the ultimate accessory by month 2. Your clothes weren't just rags. They were part of the cell's ecosystem. They absorbed body odor, dirt, blood, animal droppings, and of course, the general stench of despair. Changing clothes, never washing. Stroking the rags and wishing for fresh fabric. Sometimes, you might try shaking your tunic outside the bars, hoping some crumbs or lice would fall off. Guards either told you to stop or laughed and said, "Congratulations, you've just made everything stickier." Your clothes became a second skin you couldn't shed. And when you died, they wrapped you in those same rags for burial. Some prisoners joked, "At least I stayed in style." Prison tattoos and scar marks, since clothes were ragged. Some prisoners decorated their bodies instead. They carved initials into their arms, tattooed crosses on their chests, or branded marks from the gallows. This was partly for identity. Hey, I was here. And partly to scare newcomers. Mess with me, and you'll have my scar too. It was a grim fashion statement. Wounds as jewelry. In the dungeon, scars were the ultimate status symbols. DIY jewelry. The nose ring story. One bizarre story involves a prisoner who stole a small ring from another's nostril. Folks wore rings like trophesum in ears, some in noses to keep track of debts or friendship pacts. Need to remember who owes you stew. Check their septum ring. However it got there. Well, prison fashion has its own rules. Sometimes they traded rings for bread. Sometimes they lost them to rats. Most ended up regretting it. The smell that matched the outfit, by now your nose is gone. But your clothes still smell. Terrible. Guards learned to walk backward after collecting laundry if they did. Other prisoners would hold their breath crossing your path. Some noble visitors used long poles and clothespins to inspect cells like people inspecting skunks. Pro tip, if you ever remake a medieval sitcom about prison, scripted smell waves would be the star of every scene. Uniforms don't be silly. Modern prisons have orange jumpsuits. Medieval prisons, they were too disorganized. No two prisoners looked alike unless you count grim and ragged. This lack of uniform let guards identify escapees. That guy in the red patch on his tunic, not mine. But for prisoners, it meant zero unity. No one stuck together because no one knew who anyone was under all that filth. High fashion. Not here. Some lucky nobles thrown into castle dungeons got to keep a fancy piece of silk shirt or a fur collar just to remind them of their former life. But guards often stripped them too, equalizing misery. Then nobles cried, guards laughed, and everyone learned that silk did not repel lice. Why fashion mattered less over time. Finally, you stopped caring. After a while, you barely noticed the holes in your sleeves, or that you were wearing last year's moldy sash. You focused on surviving, keeping warm, keeping sane, and keeping your toes intact. Prison fashion taught you one thing: comfort is a luxury, something modern folks take for granted. A real bed, a roof that doesn't leak, a closet full of clean clothes. Prisoners got none of that. Closing thought, the runway of pain. So there you have it, medieval prison fashion in all its glory. Torn, filthy clothes, no shoes, no warmth rags, instead of blankets, accessories of scars and lice. If you ever feel bad for not having the latest designer gear, stop, take a deep breath. Remember chapter 14, because out in the real world, every outfit is better than prison rags, even that mismatched sock combo you swore looked edgy. Chapter 15, the jailer's mood swings so far. We've met the dungeons, bugs, rats, stench, and your fabulous lack of wardrobe. But one group of people truly rules this rotten realm: the jailers in a medieval prison. The jailer wasn't just an employee, he was king. His word was law. His mood was your fate. One minute you're begging for a crust of bread, the next you're begging for mercy after a kick to the ribs. Welcome to chapter 15, the jailer's mood swings. Guards as kings in the outside world. Guards wore uniforms, followed rules, answered to superiors. In prison, the jailer answered mainly to his whim and, maybe the local lord if he cared. That meant sadistic types who thrived on others' pain, apathetic slackers who barely lifted a finger, occasional decent souls, rare. But a few exist. Your life hung on which flavor of tyrant you drew. Morning greeting, crust or kick. Imagine waking up, you're cold, hungry, and hopeful. Maybe today you'll get some food. You stumble to the bars. You hear a clank of keys, and out steps the jailer. If he's in a good mood, he might toss you a stale crust. Maybe a splash of water. If he's in a bad mood, you might get a nasty kick for making noise, or just for breathing too loudly. No warning, no consistency. It's like a medieval slot machine. Will today be snack or smack? One crust in hand felt like a royal feast. One boot to the stomach felt like a betrayal. Bribes buying your safety when crusts and kicks weren't enough. Prisoners discovered bribes: a bit of stolen silver plate, a ring from a corpse, a favor from a visitor. Give a guard a shiny thing, and suddenly he's your pal. He might slip you extra gruel, turn a blind eye when you sneak a rat, hide your secret plea for a blanket. But bribes were risky. If caught, the guard would flip moods faster than you could hand over the coin, and you'd lose both the bribe and your dignity. Sadistic guards, the worst roommates. Some guards treated you like lab rats. They invented games: hot coal shuffle, step on heated stones in the hallway. Fun, right? Freeze tag, locked out overnight in the yard during winter. Quiet hunt, told not to move or talk. One twitch, you get smacked. They laughed when you failed, and somehow they found fresh ways to punish you daily. One infamous jailer made prisoners race while shackled. The loser got an extra kick. He called it medieval cardio. No one signed up. Apathetic guards, more dangerous than the rest. On the flip side, some guards just didn't care. They'd show up once a week, toss in rotten bread, then disappear for days. That meant no one refilling water buckets, no one checking injuries, no one stopping fights. You might think an apathetic guard is a blessing, but without any oversight, violence and disease ran wild. Rations vanished, piles of filth grew, and the only rule was anarchy. Sometimes those days ended with someone quietly dying in a corner and no one noticing until the smell got too strong. The role of alcohol: many jailers drank a lot. Tavern leftovers, smugglers' bottles. When they were drunk, they were unpredictable, sometimes kinder. Here, have 2 crusts, my friend. Sometimes crueler. You crawl under the cell door. Prisoners learned to watch for guards, staggered steps, slurred words, and empty tankards. Drunk jailers were theatrical, dangerous, but at least entertaining in a dark way. One guard even sang lullabies off key at 3 a.m. until someone begged him to stop. Then he got angry and kicked 3 people for no reason. Rare moments of mercy every once in a blue moon. You found a jailer who didn't want to be a tyrant. Maybe he had a kind heart under the chainmail. Maybe he lost a brother to disease and felt pity. Those jailers would share stories of home, slip contraband letters to loved ones, quietly cover you with an extra blanket. Moments like that felt like sunlight. You'd cling to them, hoping they remembered you after the Lord's yearly audit. Often they did, but sometimes they got replaced, and all mercy vanished with them. Prisoners versus guards. A delicate dance. Prisoners had to learn guard patterns, who to greet politely, who to avoid eye contact with times when tasks were announced, when the guard took his midday nap. You developed a sixth sense. You'd hear distant keys and think, "Oh, Judge Morel is coming." Dump the rat stew. Sometimes prisoners even coordinated. One would distract the guard, while another snuck food or water. It wasn't teamwork, it was mutual survival. Guard revolts, rare but explosive on truly desperate days. Prisoners tried to overthrow apathetic or absent guards. Makeshift weapons, sudden chaos, but revolt was rare. Guards had weapons, dogs, and town support. Only once do we know of a prison break sparked by a guard forgetting to lock the cell, leading to one glorious 15-minute dash to freedom. Most ended in failures and brutal reprisals. Final thought: the guards made the prison in medieval prisons. The walls held you in, the guards held you down. No single tool of torture mattered as much as a jailer's whims. A boot, a jest, a crust, a refusal to care. Your survival wasn't about strength or innocence. It was about reading the mood of the man with the keys. And remember, the same jailer who fed you once might stomp you tomorrow. In the medieval dungeon, the true power lay not in shackles or stocks, but in the flick of a guard's tongue-kinned word or cruel curse. Chapter 16. Religious Judgment. God might be watching, but he's quiet, so you've been beaten, starved, made miserable by rats, roaches, and jailers. But here's one more twist. Even God might have trouble finding you down there. Medieval prison life wasn't just physical torment. It was a spiritual vacuum, dark stone walls, endless misery, and the occasional wandering priest with a sermon that felt more like a lecture on your failures. Welcome to Chapter 16. Religious Judgment. Priests, sometimes visitors, mostly preachers every so often. A rope would clatter at your cell door. Through the bars, you'd see a man in a robe carrying a book, a candle, and a face that said, "I wish I were anywhere else." That's your priest, the man you're supposed to turn to for mercy, guidance, or at least a friendly chat. But in a medieval prison, that chat usually sounded like, "Repent, sinner, your soul is darker than this cell. Confess your sins, or suffer in the next world worse than you suffer here." Imagine hearing that after 3 weeks of bone, soup and blank stares. You'd beg for less food if it meant fewer lectures. Some priests carried a small reliquary, a fancy box with saint bits inside. They'd wave it at you, muttering about divine judgment. You'd squint, hoping to see a spark of hope. Instead, you got another headache. Confession in chains next up. Confession, the one place you could unburden your heart, except it wasn't quite that simple. You knelt if your ankle chain let you, and confessed your sins. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I took a loaf of bread, and once called the sheriff a lazy ox." The priest nodded, wrote something in his book, muttered a few prayers. "Then, you must atone. Pray 100 Our Fathers, and 50 Hail Marys. Great, But here's the catch. You were still wearing your ankle shackles, kneeling on cold stone, with rats underfoot, listening in like gossip mongers. Sometimes, priests even asked about your moral failings, your fear, your anger, your thoughts of escape. You poured your heart out, and got penance instead of comfort. One prisoner admitted to an entire week of weeping in chains for cursing his guards. His tears froze in the cell's draft. Last rites: if you're lucky if you fell sick, or looked close to death, you got the last rites. A quick visit from the priest to prepare your soul. He'd sprinkle holy water maybe. He'd read a few lines. He'd anoint your forehead with oil. Often you could only whisper, "I'm sorry," before the priest scooted out, off to the next cell. No warm hand on your shoulder. No "you'll be okay." Just a prayer, a heave of his cloak, and he was gone. Sometimes prisoners begged for the priest to stay. He rarely did. Heaven feels a million miles away in theory. Prison was temporary. You'd serve your time, confess, be absolved, and heaven would open its gates. In reality, hope was in short supply. Walls blocked out sunlight, food blocked out joy, chains blocked out freedom, and the priest's distant voice. It only reminded you how far heaven seemed. Sometimes you fantasized, floating on clouds of fresh bread, singing with angels wearing clean robes, not hearing rats, but every prayer felt swallowed by stone. Every plea answered by silence. Superstitions and scared. Guards, even the guards, feared divine retribution. Some superstitiously crossed themselves before entering a cell. Others muttered charms to ward off curses. It got real awkward when a priest walked in. Guards had to remember their prayers too. You'd hear them whispering behind the priest's back, "Bless me, Father, please give me the day off." They feared a ghostly visit or plague outbreak if they mistreated the holy man. But for prisoners, ghosts were a nightly hazard anyway. Religious tokens, teeny sparks of hope. Prisoners traded blessings like currency. A scrap of blessed cloth, a pinch of holy water in a hat, a whispered prayer from a cellmate. These tokens were a lifeline, proof someone, somewhere, cared about your soul. One legend tells of a prisoner who hid a tiny wooden cross under his tunic for months. When he finally got released, he kissed it and cried. Not because he was free, but because he still believed. Faith wasn't dead, it was bruised, but it flickered in the darkness. When faith fueled rebellion, not every prisoner bowed to religious fear. Some used faith as a weapon. They'd shout scripture at corrupt guards. They'd leap to their feet at mass, refusing punishment. They'd write psalms on the walls with charcoal. Sometimes the guards hated it. They'd drag the rebel to the rack or the stocks. But those brave few reminded everyone, spirit can't be caged. One story, a prisoner held a midnight service in his cell, gathering 10 men to pray for justice. They passed around a torn page of the Bible. They sang in whispers. Guards never discovered it except for the echo of Amen at dawn. Priest. These punishment priests occasionally clashed with jailers. One chronicler describes a priest refusing to bless the torture wheel. The jailer glared. The priest countered with threats of excommunication. The jailer backed off for a day. These battles were small flickers of light. They showed prisoners that even amidst cruelty, dignity could survive. Closing thought. Judged by man, judged by God. In a medieval prison, 2 judgments loomed. Man's judgment, the jailer's whim, the guard's cruelty, the law's harshness. God's judgment, the priest's sermon, the required penance, the promise of afterlife. But God stayed quiet. Man stayed loud. And you were stuck in between, praying for mercy from both and finding neither. Still, your faith flickered, because hope was the one thing no dungeon could chain. Chapter 17. Prison Politics. Who runs the cell? So you've dealt with rats, roaches, jailer kicks, and judgmental priests. You've seen the worst of walls and chains. Now welcome to the real power center of medieval prison politics. Because once the guards step away, someone still calls the shots, enforces rules, and collects taxes on your meager scraps. Let's dive into the cell's underworld. The pecking order. No elections needed. Forget democracy. In a crowded dungeon, power comes from strength, muscles, size, or sheer toughness. Fear, reputation for violence or cruelty. Cunning, the ability to manipulate or con alliances. Friends with other powerful inmates within a day. The cell arranges itself into a rough hierarchy. The cell boss sits near the door, gets first crusts, and calls the shots. Then come his lieutenants, thieves, debtors, or ex-soldiers who pledge loyalty for protection. At the bottom, you, or anyone who can't fight, shout, or bribe their way up. Weak ones become targets. Bullying, extortion, or worse. Alliances. Survival by friendship. In medieval prisons, survival often meant having a buddy or two. Alliances formed quickly. The murderer teams up with the debtors for muscle. The bread thief offers daily crusts to the big guys. The infirm find protectors in exchange for stories or stolen rags. These pacts weren't about trust. They were business deals. If you kept your end, your alliance held. If you crossed them, say goodbye to your straw patch. Once, a band of thieves pooled their stolen goods to pay off the jailer for extra rations. They survived a harsh winter together. But when spring came, one turned on the others over a single apple core. Prison alliances end as fast as they begin. Bullies and strongmen. Every cell had the tank, the massive guy who crushed fists like walnuts. Or the blade, the ex-mercenary who bragged about 100 kills. Or the brains, the con artist who whispered secrets and forged fake releases. These figures kept order by fear. If anyone stepped out of line, a punch, a broken finger, a public shaming, they enforced their own brand of justice. Sometimes they aligned with guards for extra muscle. Other times, they simply ruled the roost. One jailed knight even knighted himself, so beat a lot, and demanded tribute. He got eaten till someone stronger broke his helmet and took his title. Money talks. Bribes and black markets, gold and silver coins vanished when you entered the cell. But currency persisted. Food scraps, stolen bread, bone bits, goods, carved dice, lice-infested cloth. A rat's head has souvenir services, protecting someone for a night. Smuggling letters, a small crust could buy you safety for an hour. A well-placed promise of future coin from family bribe might get you a better spot near the door. Ledgers were imaginary, but deals were real. One prisoner ran a credit union, collecting scraps to loan out at high interest a second. Crust, it was the medieval microfinance of the dungeon, until he was found beaten and his coins gone. Informants and snitches, no cell is immune to informers. Guards would offer reduced cruelty for tips. Who's planning an escape? Who's hiding extra bread? That made trust near zero. You might see someone whisper to a guard and think, "Congrats, traitor, enjoy your bonus kick." Some informers got extra rations, others got secret beatings if discovered. It was a dangerous game. Betray too often, and no one will help when you need it. Prison courts, yes, even inside. Prisoners ran their own courts, a makeshift gathering by torchlight, a judge chosen from lieutenants, quick trials for theft, violence, or betrayal punishments. Extra chores, isolation, or a beating. It wasn't fair. It was brutal, but it gave inmates a sense of order, better than random guard cruelty. One popular sentence: the rat pit. You were thrown into a small dark stall with hungry rats until you paid a ransom. No one paid ransoms without backing. So many just suffered, then begged for mercy. The shadow court. When guards slept at night, politics lurked in darkness. Leaders held conspiracies, planning escapes, smuggling messages, overthrowing the cell boss, organizing a feast from stolen bits. But nighttime politics was risky. Guards still patrolled, sometimes in drunken slumber. One wrong move, and you woke up in a torture chamber. The cell boss long gone with your ration share. Why weak were targets, weak prisoners, injured, ill, too shy were marked. They lost rations, they got shoved into corners. They became human piñatas for the bored strong. A few tried to hide, pretending to be more injured than they were for pity, hiding in the darkest cell corners, offering servitude for protection. Some succeeded for days. Others didn't last the morning. Prisoner kings, temporary crowns sometimes. A prisoner rose to power, the cell king, through a daring deed. Leading a successful bribe for food solo, defending the cell from a guard raid, organizing a feast of stolen turnips for a week or two. They got respect, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. Soon they'd demand tribute, bully the weak, and hoard scraps till someone dethroned them in a midnight brawl. One dude famously ruled for 3 days before losing an ear in the coup. He wore a ragged crown made of wood shavings and called it honor. Survival tip: pick your battles in this messy micro-society. You learned, don't challenge the bosses unless you can handle the consequences. Stay useful, share info, help with chores, keep quiet, have a fallbacker, hidden stash, a secret ally, a bribe ready. Survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about staying alive until release, or at least until the guards got bored. Closing thought: democracy of despair. Prison politics taught one clear lesson. When people are stripped of everything but fear and scraps, they create their own. Rules harsh, chaotic, but strangely organized. You might lose your faith in the law outside, but inside, power meant respect, fear meant safety, and cunning meant everything. So if you ever think prison is antisocial, remember, it's just another society, with kings, courts, taxes, and betrayals, all run on fear, scraps, and the hope that one day, you might walk free. Chapter 18. When justice forgot about you. Let's say you've been arrested. You got thrown into a cell that smells like moldy death and bad soup. You've been screamed at, ignored, stepped on, probably bitten by something. And now, you wait. For what? Justice. Oh, my sweet summer prisoner. Justice isn't coming. Welcome to Chapter 18. When justice forgot about you. No trial, no problem. You just stay forever. In the modern world, if you're arrested, there's usually some plan in place. Trial date, a hearing, a lawyer, hopefully not asleep, and eventually a decision. Back in medieval times, not so much. You could be locked up for stealing bread, talking back to the wrong person, being in the wrong place, looking weird, breathing too confidently. But once you were tossed into prison, there was no guarantee anyone would follow up. No scheduled trial, no legal updates, just rot. You'd ask the guard, "Hey, when's my hearing?" And he'd grunt something like, "Ask God," then walk off whistling. The magical vanishing act of your name, the paperwork, was a joke. Well, assuming there even was paperwork, maybe the town scribe wrote your name down on a parchment in charcoal, which got wet, then used to wrap someone's cheese. Poof, your entire existence gone. Now you're just that one guy in the corner cell with the cough. People forgot why you were even locked up. Some said it was theft. Others said you murdered a goat. One guy thought you were a wizard. You didn't know anymore. All you knew was you were still here. A system built on shrugs. It wasn't like the jailers were trying to be evil masterminds. They just didn't care. And the courts, they were small, underpaid, and busy dealing with nobles arguing over who insulted whose hat. Peasants in a dungeon. Sometimes your name would be passed around like a lost sock. "Hey, anyone know what we're doing with Elias?" Who's Elias? The guy in cell 3. "Oh, still alive, barely. Cool, let's revisit this." Never. Years slipping by. One day at a time. Imagine being locked in a dark, cold room with no bed, no sunlight, no idea what day it is now. Repeat that. For 5 years. Or 10. It happened. Often there were men and women who were imprisoned for decades over petty accusations, and not one person ever followed up. No trial, no apology, just silence. Some of them died and their bones got swept out during plague season like old trash. Others were released, confused and blinking in the sunlight. Like, wait, the king's dead. When did that happen? Tales of the forgotten. There's a recorded case in 14th century England of a man who was jailed for stealing bread. He waited 17 years before someone realized the baker had made the story up. 17 years. For a crime that never happened. For bread he never even ate. By the time he got out, the world had moved on. He didn't recognize anyone. The baker had died peacefully in his sleep. And this man, he'd grown grey, thin, and almost cat-like from the dark. He said the worst part wasn't the pain, it was the forgetting. Even the guards moved on. Here's the wild part. Sometimes, even the guards changed. You'd be tossed into prison by one guy. He retires. A new guy replaces him. That new guy has no idea who you are, why you're in there, or how long you've been there. Were you sentenced? No. Trial? Nope. Are you supposed to be in here? I don't know anymore. And instead of fixing the mistake, they'd just say, "Welp," and continue their shift. Welcome to medieval efficiency. The forgotten had no names, just smells after a while. You weren't even that prisoner. You were that smell. From cell 6, your skin got pale. Your teeth fell out. You mumbled nonsense in your sleep. And your memories faded like candlelight in a fog. Time didn't matter anymore. Morning, night, winter, year didn't matter. You just waited. Forever. Escape? Unlikely. Mercy? Rare death? Most likely. Some prisoners tried to bribe guards, offer a family ring, a promise, even a joke. But if no one remembered you, you had nothing to bargain with. You were invisible, a ghost trapped in skin, and eventually, like most medieval prisoners, you died, quietly, nameless, rotting in a corner, underneath layers of rat poop and crushed hope. History doesn't remember the forgotten, but maybe we should. The records didn't care. Historians couldn't always find their names. Their stories vanished. But once in a while, an old letter or scribbled note pops up, saying something like, "The prisoner in the dark room died today. No one knew his name. He had soft eyes." And that's it. That's the legacy of someone who was forgotten by the law, by the church, by everyone. Final thought. Medieval prisons weren't about justice. They were about power and neglect. If you slipped through the cracks, tough luck. You didn't get a lawyer. You didn't get a timeline. You didn't even get remembered. So next time you feel frustrated waiting in line at the DMV, just be glad someone actually knows your name. Because in a medieval dungeon, being forgotten was the worst sentence of all. Chapter 19. Women in medieval prisons. Different cell. Same nightmare. Okay, buckle up. This chapter gets real heavy. You think medieval prison was awful for men? Yeah, it was. But for women, it was like the nightmare came with a bonus level. Let's talk about what happened when you were a woman locked up in a medieval dungeon. First things first, equal opportunity. Misery? Nope. See, medieval prisons didn't exactly have a ladies' wing. There were no female guards, no hygiene products, no extra protection. You got tossed into a dark, disease-ridden cell, just like the men, sometimes with the men. And guess what? That didn't go well. Women weren't seen as prisoners with rights. They were seen as property gone wrong. And once inside that prison, the chances of anyone treating you like a person, basically zero. What crimes did women get locked up for? You might think it took something huge to get tossed into a medieval dungeon: murder, betrayal, treason. But for women, the bar was lower. So low, it lived underground. Let's list a few crimes. Witchcraft, big one. And it didn't take much. Own a cat. Witch, being immodest. Translation, you wore something slightly fun or spoke up in church. Getting pregnant without a husband. Yup, into the cell you go. Defying your husband, yelled back. Prison, left the house without asking. Prison, stealing bread. Same as the men, but somehow with more public shaming. And sometimes, you didn't even commit a crime. You were just around when a man did. Seriously, my husband stole a pig. Oh no. Guess what, Susan, you're going with him. The special hell called witchcraft accusations. If someone in town stubbed their toe, lost a sheep, or had a weird dream, guess who got blamed? Yep, a woman. Witchcraft was the medieval version of, I don't like her, and I need a reason. And the trial was a joke. Float, witch sink, oops dead. Survive both. Must be the devil's work. Burn her. Once accused, you were basically guilty. Before your feet hit the cell floor. The prison cell, worse than you'd think. Now let's paint the picture. You're a woman in a dark cell. It's freezing, or sweltering. Never in between. No windows, no privacy, no toilet, no help. And if you were thrown in with men, good luck. Sexual violence was disturbingly common. Some women were locked up alone, but that wasn't always better. It just meant less food, less human contact, more hallucinations. It was like being trapped in your worst nightmare, while also being blamed for causing it. No one was coming to help. If you think your family might step in, don't hold your breath. Your father might disown you. Your husband might say, she brought shame. The village priest might drop by, only to say, you deserve this. Even other women sometimes turned against you, especially with witchcraft stuff. Support system non-existent. Hope fading. Hair falling out. Seriously, malnutrition and stress did a number. The jailer's interest. Let's talk about guards. Were they professional? Laughs in medieval. Some were bored, others cruel. Some, let's just say, they took an interest in female prisoners. Many women were abused, and if they complained, guess what? No one believed them. Or worse, the jailer would say, she asked for it. No justice, no protection, just survive. Pregnancy behind bars. Oh boy, some women ended up pregnant before prison, some because of prison. And once you were showing, life didn't get easier. There was no medical care, no midwife. You gave birth in a dark corner, possibly with a rat cheering you on. Babies born in prison often didn't survive, and those who did were sometimes kept in prison with the mother. Imagine being born into a dungeon. Your first word might be please. Execution was always on the table. Just because you were locked up didn't mean you wouldn't face the axe, the noose, or the fire, especially for crimes of the soul. Witchcraft, heresy, immodesty, they weren't just frowned upon, they were punishable by death, and the trials were often public. Your humiliation, a town event, execution, front row seats. Sometimes they made women confess on stage. Sometimes they paraded them through the town before hanging. Always cruel, rarely fair. Never forgettable. Some fought back quietly now. It wasn't all silence and tears. Some women resisted. They scratched messages into the walls. They told stories. They prayed. They made deals. There are tales of women escaping, usually with the help of sympathetic strangers. One legend tells of a woman who braided her prison rags into a rope and climbed out a window. Probably not true, but in a world that brutal, hope needs legends. Why it matters, you might be thinking. Okay, but this was a long time ago. True, but the way these women were treated, discarded, shamed, abused, tells us something. Not just about prisons, but about how societies treat the vulnerable. How fear turns into cruelty. How people turn away instead of helping. And how being a woman in the wrong time was sometimes a sentence in itself. Final thought. So yeah, medieval prison was bad for everyone, but for women, it was worse than bad. It was cruel, It was isolating. It was often deadly. And yet, somehow, some of them survived. Some of them held on. Some of them still whispered prayers and sang lullabies and told stories to rats and dust. They were strong. They were forgotten, but not by us. Tonight, as you curl up in your warm bed, just remember, if you were born a few centuries earlier and wore the wrong hat or annoyed the wrong man, you might have found yourself sharing straw with a rat and whispering to God in the dark. Chapter 20. Children behind bars. All right. We've talked about grown men screaming. We've talked about women locked away for just existing. But now we're diving into something that might hit even harder. Kids. Yes. Even the tiniest, mud-covered, wide-eyed little humans weren't safe from the cold stone and iron of a medieval prison. How did a kid end up in prison? Let's start. Here, medieval justice wasn't exactly gentle. There was no time-out corner, no talk to your feelings session, no school counselor patting your back saying, stealing bread means you're hungry, not bad. Nope. If you were a kid and you stole, begged on the street, got caught pickpocketing or wandering too close to a lord's horse, straight to jail. And we're not talking juvenile detention center with art therapy. We're talking cold, damp dungeon with adults who probably hadn't seen daylight in months, stealing to survive. Still a crime. You have to remember, back then, poverty wasn't rare, it was normal. Parents died of plagues. Families were scattered by war. Famine showed up like an unwanted guest every other year. So, you had kids alone on the streets, doing anything to survive. Stealing apples, begging outside taverns, sleeping in barns. And what did the town do? Arrest them, because begging was public nuisance. Stealing was theft. And being poor, basically, suspicious by default. No age limit on chains. There was no minimum age to be imprisoned. You could be 8, or 10, or 5, if someone felt particularly grumpy that day. And once you were in, no one said, wait, this one's just a baby. They slapped shackles on your tiny wrists, threw you in with everyone else, told you to shut up and not cry too loud. Spoiler, you still cried. The cellmates weren't friendly now. Imagine this. You're a 10-year-old, scared and cold, and your bunkmates are a highway robber who's missing an ear, a guy who smells like onions and regret, and a woman who once bit a priest. Not exactly a nurturing environment. There was no kids' corner, no coloring books, just rats, filth, and threats whispered in the dark. What did the kids do all day? Short answer, survive. There were no toys, no schooling, no recreation hour. Maybe you got some moldy bread. Maybe someone taught you how to hide scraps from the bigger inmates. Maybe you learned how to keep your head down and your mouth shut. And if you didn't, let's just say, medieval prisons didn't come with a complaints department. The emotional toll, you know, that hollow feeling you get when you lose something important. Now, stretch that out for months or years and add the sound of screaming echoing through stone walls. That's what it was like for a kid growing up behind bars. You weren't just locked up, you were forgotten. Some kids were orphans, others had parents who couldn't afford the bribe to get them out. A few were simply left there because no one cared enough to ask. Imagine being 12 and realizing no one's coming for you. Not now, not ever. Sick, too bad, got a fever. Tough luck, got lice, that's normal. Got an infected wound from sleeping on broken stone. Tried not to cry too loud. There were no doctors, and the guards didn't exactly hand out medicine. Some kids died right there in the cell. No name, no funeral, just vanished. And guess what? Their cellmates probably had to push their body to the side until the jailer felt like removing it. Stories from the records. Yep, this happened. There are medieval records of boys and girls as young as 7 locked up for stealing bread, playing dice, or being found alone on the streets. In 14th century England, a 9-year-old boy was jailed for theft of 2 chickens. In some parts of Europe, entire families were imprisoned, and that included toddlers. One German report from the 1400s talks about a girl who was locked up with her newborn baby because the village suspected her of lying about who the father was. The baby didn't survive. The mother was hanged, and the town went back to baking bread like it was a normal Tuesday. Did anyone try to help? Rarely, but yes, sometimes. Occasionally, a priest or a kind merchant would notice a child behind bars and buy their freedom. Other times, monks would plead for release in exchange for unpaid labor. But for most kids, they had to grow up fast, or not grow up at all. Some became tougher than steel. Others broke completely. When a kid became a real criminal. Now, here's the kicker. Survive long enough in prison as a kid, and guess what? You become a career criminal. Not because you're evil, because the only skills you learned were stealing, fighting, hiding food, staying silent, distrusting everyone. Society took a poor, hungry child and built a perfect adult outlaw. Then they hanged you for it later. Neat system, right? Final thought. A candle in the dark. Kids aren't built for dungeons. They're built for chasing geese, drawing in the dirt, and yelling, "Look what I found," while holding something disgusting. But in the medieval world, innocence didn't keep you safe. If anything, it made you an easier target. So tonight, if you're snuggled up in bed, warm and safe, spare a thought for the tiny footsteps that echoed through the cold halls of a forgotten dungeon. Because once upon a time, some poor kid like you once were sat in the dark, counting cracks in the wall, wondering, "Why am I here?" And no one ever answered.